Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order tonight the Village of Westmont Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, April 10th. It is 7 o'clock on the button. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Carmichael.
Here.
Commissioner Sharp.
Here.
Commissioner Van Buren is here. Commissioner Thomas.
Here.
Commissioner Bartel.
Here.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Here.
And Chairman Pill.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Having a quorum, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before you sit down, I need to swear in anyone who is going to give testimony tonight, either for or against. So even if you think you may not come up, it's a good idea to do it now so we don't have to interrupt the meeting later on. Please raise your right hand, and a simple I do. Do you swear that your testimony tonight will be truthful, so help your God? I do. Consider yourself sworn in, except everyone except the gentleman in the hallway. And I would ask that everyone silence any pagers or cell phones that you have. Please be seated. All righty. Tonight, I've repeatedly asked if you come up to the podium to speak. If you have not signed in already, some people pre-signed in to make it faster. There is a sign-in sheet up at the podium. I ask that you sign in and state your name into the microphone when it's your turn to speak. We do have a TV audience, probably numbering thousands. And so make sure that you are up at the podium when you speak. I don't want anyone speaking from their chairs because you have to be near a microphone and on camera so that it's recorded. Our first order of business tonight is the approval of the minutes of the March 13th, 2019 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Bartel, second by Commissioner Thomas. Questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. Thank you. Next is our open forum. Is there anyone who is here tonight to speak on a subject that is not on the agenda? Thank you. Seeing none, we will have a quick review of our public hearing procedures. So tonight, I will introduce each item on the agenda. I am going to be calling for a motion in just a few moments to change the order of the agenda, moving the second item up first, the third item second, and our old business, which is the property at 301, 315 West Ogden Avenue, to third. So that will happen in a few seconds. As I introduce each item on the order that we will then change, please approach the speaking area and make sure that you've signed in. We invite the presenting team or individuals to present their agenda item, explaining the item so that it's clear and addressing any findings of fact and hardship as relevant. There's an overhead projector, which is operated by the man behind the mirror, for any diagrams, as we do have a TV audience at home. Staff will then offer comments. I'll then open the public hearing. Everybody will have a chance to speak on any particular subject they want, and the applicant may address those concerns. Each commissioner will then offer comments and question the applicant or staff. There'll be a discussion amongst the commissioners. I'll then close the public hearing at the conclusion and have a vote with a motion and a second and a roll call for each item listed on our agenda. After that, the applicant is instructed in each of the next steps. All righty. We begin our open hearing tonight. I'd like to entertain a motion, please, to begin this evening with Planning and Zoning item 19-008, followed by 19-009.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Carmichael, second by Commissioner Van Buren. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael.
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp. Chairman Pill.
Yes. All righty. I will open the hearing for our first item, new business, Planning and Zoning, item 19-008. A request from Dan and Sarah Steve regarding the property located at 332 59th Street in Westmont for the following. A variance request for a proposed 816 square foot garage measuring 24 by 34. Good evening and welcome.
Thank you. Pull this up here. Okay, so, nope.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm Sarah Steve.
I'm Dan Steve.
So we are, start out here. We're at 332 59th Street. Our address is technically Downers Grove, but we're really in Westmont. We're right there on the border. Our house was built in 1947. We bought it in 2016. Over the past few years, we've spent a lot of time trying to fix it up, improve it, and so our next step now is to tear down the garage that's currently there and build a new one, which is why we're here. So basically, our proposal, or what we'd like to do, is to remove the current garage, which is a single-car detached garage measuring 14 by 21. And so we'd like to replace that with a new garage that's measuring 24 by 34, 816 square feet. The current ordinance, as you know, allows a maximum of 576 square feet. So we think we have some good reasoning as to why we, think we need to have this larger size garage. So here I think these images are important to point out just so you can see the shape of the current garage that we have. Definitely it's original to the house, kind of basically falling apart. When the inspector came and looked at it when we bought the house, they basically said that it was a tear down and needed to probably be torn down in the next couple of years.
The
So-
shape of the garage is more than just the peeling paint. The siding is actually rotten. It was built on cinder blocks, so we have a problem with pests getting in, rodents. There's just always a draft. You can actually rock the structure. The inspector did that.
Yeah, so either way, something will need to be done to replace it. So one of our main reasons here is just because our property, we feel, is kind of an exception to your typical Westmont property, right? So average Westmont property is 9,000 square feet. Ours is 33,000, so it's 100 feet by 330 feet. So we kind of feel that a larger size structure really makes sense when you look at our home
The size of the property.
compared to others, right? So this image is taken directly from our plat, where you can see that's all our entire yard, and then the little green squares are our house and our current garage. So you can see there is tons and tons of yard space to maintain and improve, which is why here we have the proposed 24 by 34 garage, and as you can see, we're still not taking up a huge amount of the property, which we feel it's kind of a reasonable size to fit within the structure. So that being said, some of the reasons why we think it's important to have this size garage is because we really need the space for the vehicles we have, machines, snow blower, riding lawnmower, the tools that we need to maintain the property. Just because it is such a large yard, we actually do need a lot of different tools and things to be able to maintain it. So that's kind of a big reason why we feel like we need this space. So we've kind of thought about what else we could do if we didn't have this size of a garage, and we think that we would be kind of in a difficult situation. We would either need to keep some tools or machines outside of the garage, or we would need to come back and build a separate structure and build a shed, which, if we had the option, we would rather just keep everything in one place, in one building, as opposed to, having to then have a separate shed. So this is a little bit hard to see, but we actually, on graph paper, we drew out exactly where we would put everything. We put a lot of thought into the actual size that we think makes the most sense. We didn't just kind of throw numbers out there. So we looked at, how our two cars would fit in there, with the shelves we'd like to have, storage, workspace, snow blower,
Some of the machines that
lawnmower.
we already have.
Right, so, looking at this, this, wouldn't necessarily be the structure, but we kind of feel like looking at all of this, all the things that we have, all the things that we'll probably eventually have when we have a family, you know, we'll need all of this space and definitely use it. So it just kind of gives you an idea, I think, of kind of how we anticipate using it. Also, there are a few known properties right around us, right on our same street, that actually already do have similar size or even larger garages or structures.
Then the 576 square feet.
Yep, and so we think that's kind of important to point out that, you know, we're not
These-
the only ones looking to do this.
And they have larger properties as well.
Right.
Similar to
similar
2/3 of
size.
an acre like
Right.
us.
So here's just an example. This is pulled directly from Zillow, where this property right on our street, on 59th Street, they have this large barn, where actually in the listing it says that it's 1,402 square feet in a detached garage. So, you know, just kind of an example there. And then also, this is an image of our two next door neighbors. You can see in the yellow, that's our current garage, which is 14 by 21.
Which is
And
roughly
then-
300 square feet.
Right. And then there's, in the red boxes, those are two garages that are next to us. And you can clearly see that those are, you know, well over the 576 square feet. And the far left garage, that one we definitely know is newer as well, whereas ours is, you know, original to when the house was built. That one, we believe it was built probably in the last 10 years. So just kind of something also to note. A few other points that we think are important to note is that we've, you know, done the research and made sure that this garage would not impact any other structures, any trees. It wouldn't impact any of our neighbors. You know, so we know that there would be no negatives in that regard. Also, the neighbors next to us who would be the closest to this garage and who would be most likely the most impacted, they have verbally approved of what we would like to do. We've talked to them about it, and they are perfectly fine with what we want to do. They actually, I think, would be very happy
Yeah.
to not see the garage that's
I
there
think they're
anymore.
looking forward to seeing,
Yeah.
to having the current one removed.
Yeah. And then the other point also is just that the existing garage, if we were to replace it, you know, with the same size that it is now, it would not add any really value to the property by keeping what it is now. And also just a last note is just that we have no intention of putting this garage in and then, you know, up and leaving. You know, we bought this house in Downers
Yeah.
Grove or in Westmont,
Westmont, yeah.
just because we love the area. We grew up here. You know, we plan
like
on
to start a family
having
here.
a family here, and right, and so we really want to have this garage what we, you know, want it to be, have our dream garage, so we can stay there long term and not have to move. And yeah, I guess that's
all that we have.
basically it.
Great. That's a great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will now turn to staff. And staff, would you like to offer some comments, please?
I think I concur with what they say from a planning perspective. The maximum size allowed in the code is 576 square feet, and they're proposing 816 square feet. There have been variances granted of this sort in the past, as can be seen from the properties that are adjoining. In terms of the findings of fact, this would allow the applicants to store landscaping equipment. We did receive phone calls from neighbors and from the homeowners association asking us about this particular case. And they concurred that they would like to see the landscaping equipment inside the structure rather than parked outside, and that it would be useful to have something like this that would be able to hold that type of equipment that would maintain a larger lot. This is 33,000 plus square feet, and they will be needing to handle a lot of work. And rather than parking it on the street, it would be a good reason to have a larger garage. The depth of the garage proposed is 34 feet, and that is deeper than allowed by code. But there will be a door in the back, from what I understand,
Yes.
from which the lawnmower will be coming out into the lawn rather than having to go over the grass in the front lawn. And that room will be needed additional to the cars that would be placed in the front. So staff does concur with their request as far as from a planning perspective.
Great, thank you. Attorney Zemanek, any questions or comments from you?
No.
Great. I'll go to the public now. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak about this, either for or against? Yes, sir. Did you have a chance to sign in already?
Yes, I did.
Great. Podium's yours.
I'm John High. I live at 321 59th, kitty cornered. I have no problem with the size of the garage. If it was me, I would make it bigger, but I have no problem, and it fits in the neighborhood.
Great, thanks so much, appreciate that. Anyone else like to speak this evening? All righty, I'm going to move on now to commissioners, and I will begin with Commissioner Thomas this evening.
Hi, great presentation, informative. When I first read it and you were, in your presentation, you were talking about additional equipment and that, I'm thinking he has a yard service and he's going to be storing it. This additional equipment is for this huge lot.
Yes.
And I am 100% for this. I support it. And again, a great presentation and answered every one of my questions before I got a chance to ask it. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Sharp, please.
Yeah, I concur with everything that was said, and I think it was a great presentation. You guys clearly need that size garage for your lot, so I think it's a pretty straightforward request. And, I mean, the lot's huge, so.
Yes.
It is.
So I'm fully supportive.
Thank you, Commissioner Bartel.
I also am very supportive, and it is a great idea to take that garage down, because that is in bad shape.
Yeah.
So, absolutely, as long as the neighbor's okay, there's no drainage problems or water issues, I'm all for it. Thank you.
Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes, I have no questions, and I'm supportive of the petition.
You, Commissioner Carmichael.
Well, I've never heard Commissioner Lavoy be so quick before. It's very impressive.
Mark it down.
He's saving it up.
Saving it.
Oh,
And ditto here, good luck with it.
Thank you.
thank you, Commissioner Van Buren.
I agree, I'm 100% for it. Good planning, good presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, I appreciate the presentation. Everyone said that, but it makes our job a lot easier when you're thorough, and I loved having the little PowerPoint, the pictures and stuff. Just for our audience at home, there's roughly, you guys are somewhere in the area of under 12% lot coverage, even with the additional structure. So 35% is what we look for. Sometimes we'll talk about 40, but 12% is certainly well under the benchmark area, so you guys are in great shape. Thank you very much. I am supportive also. Are there any comments from any commissioners? Great. I will close the public hearing on this, and I will call for a motion, please, on Planning and Zoning Item 19-008, a request from Dan and Sarah Steve at the property at 332 59th Street in Westmont for a variance request for proposed 816 square foot garage measuring 24 by 34.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Thomas, second by Commissioner Bartel. Comments or discussion on the motion? I remind everyone that your vote will include findings of fact, which were given to all the commissioners ahead of time. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, and Chairman Pill?
Yes. So you have our recommendation that will be forwarded on by staff to the village board. They will be in touch with you when you will appear before them for a final vote, and that will take place on a Thursday night sometime in the next few weeks or a month or so.
Okay.
Good luck. Thanks for a great presentation.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
You close it now.
Continuing on, Planning and Zoning Item 19-009, a request from Allison and Ryan Lang regarding the property located at 5832 Raintree Lane in Westmont for the following. A variance request for a proposed 6-foot-high replacement fence along the side yard adjoining a street. Good evening. Have you folks signed in?
Yes.
Great. Podium is yours.
Thank you.
Are we gonna get dueling PowerPoints here now, back to back? Do you have it up on the screen?
It's up on the
But
computer,
it's
yeah,
not
but it's
here.
not, it's not going to the,
That's why we brought paper copies.
There we go.
Perfect.
You are live.
All right. Hi, I'm Allison Lang.
and I'm Ryan Lang.
Whoops. Let's try that again. Okay. So we have owned our home, 5832 Raintree Lane, for about 2.5 years. Just a little background, as you can see, our side yard runs along 59th Street. And you can see our home is actually very close to our property line. The chimney comes out, so it's about anywhere from 3 feet to 5 feet from that fence. The fence itself is then about 2 feet from the sidewalk, which is then, I believe, the sidewalk is 5 feet, and then it's about 16 feet from the end of the sidewalk to the street. So our house is very close to 59th Street. I also think it's very important to note that our house is at the end of a cul-de-sac. Excuse me. So our fence being there actually visually encloses our cul-de-sac. It keeps the foot traffic and car traffic visually. Our fence is a visual barrier from that. It also is important to note that we currently have a 6-foot fence. Our neighbors as well also have a 6-foot fence there, which you'll see in further slides and you probably see in front of you. Excuse me. Anything else there? Okay. So this was from the most recent windstorm that we had. I believe it was last month. And you can see right there, so that's actually into our backyard. Our chimney is, there's typically a gate that goes in front of that, which is now currently on the ground. We feel that by putting up a 3-foot or a 4-foot fence along the side of our property opens up our property to the foot traffic, like I said, to the foot traffic, to the car traffic. It makes our neighborhood less desirable. It's a cul-de-sac, it gives that safety and security being in a cul-de-sac, whereas you have a 3-foot fence or a 4-foot wrought iron fence, it's not, you don't get that same feeling. And I refer to that obviously as a 4-foot open design fence. I do feel that, we don't plan on selling our home. And this is our home. We have 2 children, 2 small children, which also is, a concern for us with a small fence. But we do feel that in the future, if we ever decide to sell our home, that could potentially decrease our property value, the desire to purchase our home, as well as our neighbor's home, our neighbors' homes as well. Okay. I do feel that our situation is a very unique situation in that like I said, we are a cul-de-sac. There is no car traffic to and from 59th Street. Our street is enclosed that way, so therefore, our 6-foot fence would not obstruct any vision lines of drivers or sight lines of drivers. And as you can see, that's our fence, the brown one.
The brown one to the right.
To the right, sorry. And then the lighter brown, obviously, to the left is our neighbors. I do feel that, we do feel that our 6-foot fence, which is currently grandfathered in, is in desperate need of replacement. It's beyond repair. You will see in the next couple of slides what I'm talking about. I already touched on that as well. Okay, so here is just some examples of the damage. That is actually the back, that first picture is the back of our property. Our neighbor's branch had fallen, which impacted the stability of the back of the fence, which is why you can see the 2x4 supporting the back of our fence. The third picture is just to show you the condition of the wood. It's rotting. You can see that post is the next one to go, essentially. We had a winter storm on November 26th, which resulted in a significant amount of ice impacting that section of the fence. We have it anchored so that it does not fall onto the sidewalk, which is, like I said, 2 feet from the fence. This is that same storm, another section of our fence. Another branch from our neighbor's tree had fallen. Again, the March 14th windstorm.
We were basically given no option as to what to do. It was, beyond repair there. So these are just some benefits that we feel, not only for us, but for our neighbors as well. Just aesthetically, looking at a 6-foot fence, meeting up with a 3 or 4 foot fence, it just, may look interesting. It would just allow more people to come into our cul-de-sac, unwanted individuals, perhaps. The privacy of 2 adjoining 6-foot fences, as well as the safety and security. We bought in a cul-de-sac in a subdivision for a reason. You have that sense of security that if someone's coming into the cul-de-sac that you don't want there, 1 or 5 of your neighbors is going to see them before they leave. And we feel that having a lower fence will not provide that same feeling. So we are proposing to install a 6-foot dog-eared shadow box fence. This is actually a photograph of our neighbor's fence that they have along the north side of our property line. They have that current fence, and we would like to continue the design of that throughout. And that is all.
Great. Another good presentation. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I will turn to staff and see if there are any comments.
Well, the variance request is for a replacement of an existing fence. And if they were to tear down this fence, they would not be able to rebuild under the current zoning code regulations. So they would have to either build a 3-foot-high wood fence or a 4-foot-high metal fence that would be open. The other alternative would be to build a 6-foot-high fence behind the rear of their home and set back 15 feet. So that would reduce the size of their yard and also open up the southern edge of their property to traffic along 59th Street, increased noise, and the dog would be confined to a smaller area and so on. So staff does concur with this application. Also, there have been other applications in the past to provide for variances for this type of fence, and they've been granted. And the other point would be that we concur with, that they would have to continue repairing their their fence. And to do that would be piecemeal, taking out a board or 2, or replacing that section and so on, which is untenable, and it really wouldn't add to the aesthetics of the area. So we concur with their application.
Thank you. John, any questions? No. I'll go to the public now. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this? Yes, sir. Have you been sworn in?
Yes.
Okay. And have you signed in?
Yes.
Great. 2 for 2.
2 for 2. I'm betting 1,000 today. Not very often I do that, but anyway. My name's Les Marco. I live adjacent or across the street from the Langs, and the photo of my fence you saw adjacent to theirs.
Okay.
I totally support what's going on, what they're doing. I've been here since 2005, and I can tell you that the prior owners of that house didn't do any kind of maintenance on it, on that fence. It's fallen. That's not the first time that fence fell down, by the way. It's fallen down several times.
Are you 5828?
31. Across the
Okay,
street.
you're on that side, okay.
Yeah,
yep.
I have the fence.
So your fence goes along 59th
Correct.
also, yes.
Yeah. So like I said, I think they brought up all good points about security and safety. I understand the reason for smaller, shorter fences, along the side of a house. If you have an intersection or a curved road, so drivers can see children maybe running out or something like that. In this case, 59th Street's totally straight. There's no intersection. So I don't see any safety risk in having a tall, solid fence. So I'm all for it.
Thank you, appreciate that. Anyone else like to speak on this? Yes, ma'am. Good evening, have you signed in?
Yeah.
Perfect.
My name is Gina Gaspari. I live at 5802. Actually, I'm on Rain Tree Court. I'm on the end of the cul-de-sac. I just want a personal thing here. I've lived in that house 21 years, and my kids are now grown. We're very small, and part of the reason we moved there, and I think with all of us in the neighborhood, is it was safe. It was safe for our children. My daughter, who's 24, was 3 at the time, and she's been running that neighborhood on the streets and safe since that time. And I would like to give them the same opportunity to let their kids grow up on that neighborhood. It's been a wonderful experience for us, and I just think it's important that we let this keep going. It's just the amount of, it's safety more than anything, and obviously aesthetic too. It really would look silly with uneven fence. So it's more for safety, for their children, just like my children had. You know, we've been here a long time. We have no intention of leaving Westmont. We've loved it here forever. So just, I would agree with them and support everything they do with this project. I think it's very important. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else like to speak on this? Yes, sir. Great, and signed it?
Yes.
Perfect.
My name's Perry Day. I live at 5825 Raintree Lane. I think it's a big safety issue just because there are a lot of little kids. I have little kids myself, and with the 3-foot fence, I am worried about somebody taking them. I mean, there is no visual interference with anything. We moved into the neighborhood due to the safety factor that I could let my kids outside and I did not have to worry. You saying that they'd have to put up a 3-foot fence does raise a, red flag with me and my family as far as if we'd want to stay. So that's all I have to say. Thank you. We approve them.
Great, thank you. And yes, please. Have you signed in already?
Yeah.
Great.
My name is Agnes Matson. I'm the neighbor that has the proposed fence that they do want. I live right next to them. I think another reason, besides, obviously the security, I have my 2 dogs that I walk at 5 a.m. weekdays. And from spring up until winter, 59th is busy with runners in the morning. You have people that ride their bikes to work at 5 a.m. I mean, there's random people walking in the middle of the 59th Street at 5 a.m. So, I mean, it's a general concern. Obviously, storms are going to continue. The windstorms are, we're in the Midwest, so it's not a guarantee that this is going to stay safe. And you can't remove every tree. So I think for them, it's important to be allowed to have the fence that they want. I think just the consistency of having it look nice, too, has a nice effect on the subdivision. It makes that side of Westmont look pretty, like the other side of 59th, crosscast. But I think it's just, it keeps our subdivision safe, as everybody else in our neighborhood said. I mean, we're close neighbors. Obviously, we're all here supporting them. But it's just that comfort knowing that nobody can get in, knock. I mean, right now that fence is so easy to just knock over, and somebody could either hop the fence if it goes down to 4 feet. I mean, we have teenagers, kids of all ages. I mean, how easy is it to just hop the fence? Or, now we have all these like burglaries notices and like the Nextdoor app or whatever. So you're constantly aware that there are more burglaries happening. People leave their cars we leave our cars in our driveway. We feel safe. But having a lower fence, I think it just makes it more attractive to just say, hey, let's hop the fence. Their house is right there. My house is right next door. Our neighbors we're all in this little cul-de-sac. So I think having that fence just provides security, stability, keeps that, subdivision safe and welcomes more families, because there are more houses going up for sale in the subdivision. So I think we would like to attract more families, but I think that would be one issue that, somebody's doing a drive around checking. That is a big issue.
Great, thank you so much. Anyone else? All righty, we're going to move on to commissioners, and I will begin with Commissioner Sharp.
Hi. Great presentation again. We'll just probably all say that. It was great. I think I understand also the importance of setting fence height limitations for different yards, the front yard, side yard, backyard. There's good design reasons to do that. It's good to be able to see across the street, to keep eyes on the street for your front yard, which is why it's lower in the front, the maximums. And it's also aesthetically more welcoming and neighborly to be able to see each other in general. In the back, we don't have that same situations, so we allow higher fences. So these side yards, especially side yards like yours that are adjacent to very high or higher traffic volumes than a normal neighborhood street, to me it makes perfect sense to allow this variance, and for all the reasons you've already mentioned, security and safety of your children. I live on a very busy street, so I understand where you're coming from 100%. And I would not, without a strong fence, I would not be safe. I would not feel comfortable at all letting my children out in my yard. So I'm very supportive. Again, I appreciate the presentation, and I got no questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Bartel.
Again, excellent presentation, thank you. Legitimate request, especially with the posts rotting, so you can't necessarily keep piecemealing it together. And the neighbor's fence meeting that, that's a big piece of it too aesthetically, so very supportive. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Lavoy.
I do have a question, and really just for your protection. Okay, if you go to page 3 of the package that shows the survey, just want to make sure if when you invest in the fence, there's discrepancies on the survey related to the property line offsets. Do you see where on the rear yard where it says .6 ON?
Mm-hmm.
That means 0.6 feet away from the existing fence. So when you put the new fence there in its old place, it looks to me, what you see here is it would be on the adjoining property, which you don't want to do. So I would have your experts look at that to make sure that when you do put the fence in, it's put in correctly. The other thing is the basics of the bearing says R and M, which means recorded and measured. It's almost impossible to do that the way it's shown on here because the rear irons, the found iron pipes, don't match up, so it doesn't really, the math could not work. So something's wrong.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure that you're aware and make sure that, you know, you don't put the fence on the adjoining properties. We haven't heard from the neighbor to the east, so, or to the west, whatever way I'm looking at it here. But anyway, so be careful, and it's a tight property because of the offsets of the building, so make sure that's done. Otherwise, it's very supportive, thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure you're going to be okay with it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Carmichael.
I learned something from Commissioner Lavoy every time we meet. That's amazing. Yeah, your request makes total sense. This is a unique situation. You're the backside of a cul-de-sac, and that's for privacy, and as it should be. I live on 59th Street further east, and I have a 40-inch fence, but I live on a corner, and so it's a totally different situation. So, I'm supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Van Buren.
I support it, too.
Commissioner Thomas.
No questions, well done. I support.
Great. Looks good to me also. You have my support also. Any additional comments or questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing on this, and I will entertain a motion for Planning and Zoning, item 19-009, a request from Allison and Ryan Lang regarding the property at 5832 Rain Tree Lane in Westmont for the following. A variance request for a proposed 6-foot-high replacement fence along the side yard adjoining a street.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Carmichael, second by Commissioner Van Buren. I remind everyone that this will include, your vote will include findings of fact as it relates to that. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
And Chairman Phil.
Yes. So you have our recommendation, congratulations, and you will be notified by staff as to when you will appear before the village board for final disposition. That'll take place sometime in the next few weeks or a month or something like that, but they'll be in touch with you. Best of luck with that. All righty. Moving on now, we will go back to old business, planning and zoning item 19-005. A request from Bill Debs of GSP Development regarding the properties located at 301 to 315 West Ogden Avenue and 530 North Park Street in Westmont, Illinois for the following. A zoning map amendment to rezone the property at 530 North Park Avenue from the current R3 zoning to the proposed B2 zoning, and B, a plan of consolidation to combine the properties at 301 to 315 West Ogden Avenue and 530 North Park Street into one lot, and C, site and landscape plan for a proposed new medical office building, And D, a variance from zoning ordinance section 4.05E to allow parking to encroach into a required yard. Gentlemen, so before we begin, I'd like to just do a couple things. I'm going to officially open up the hearing on this. This was continued from last month, so we are reopening the hearing from last month. Because you presented last month, it's not necessary that you go through in detail, but I would like you to give a brief synopsis of what the project, any changes that have been made in the last month, and any expert testimony you've brought with you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Larry Debb. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you for giving us a chance to come back in front of you. I do have with me our architect, Brian, so if there's any specific architectural, as well as we brought the materials, the actual precast, actual brick, glass, metal panels, things like that, so you can really see the quality that we're talking about. In addition, John's with us, who is probably, you two could sit and talk for hours about stormwater detention and whatnot, but I know that became a big question, and he's here to answer any specific questions that I was unable to answer at the last meeting. So quickly as an overview, it's an older C-quality shopping center right now. If you see by this, along Ogden Avenue, there's no landscaping whatsoever. There's no sidewalk along Ogden Avenue. There's 5 curb cuts currently along Ogden Avenue now. In addition, there's no trees or islands or any landscaping on the entire site. So this is, it would be a significant improvement from what is there now. The next page kind of shows the current zoning, and you can see my neighbor. He's been given zoning for what was a residential lot is now become a commercial lot, and we're asking for the same, and that's true as you go up and down Ogden Avenue. So I just put this in here to show that this is not something that I'm asking that hasn't been granted or given to others along Ogden Avenue. The next one is a site plan. It's not a landscape plan, this is just a site plan to show our single entrance off of Ogden Avenue and an additional one on the east side of our property. All the landscape islands are shown also. We are asking for some relief on some of the sizes of the parking stalls themselves. Just as a side note, this parking dimensions would be approved in virtually every other community in the western suburbs right now. So your code is much stricter than, not that it's the wrong code, but it's much stricter than anyone else. So this would be okay in Oak Brook or in Downers Grove or anywhere else. So we are asking though for some relief on the size of those. You had said what changes we've made. We have made some changes on our landscape plan. We've actually pulled it off of Ogden Avenue a little bit. We have a few feet, we'll have a strip of landscaping of grass, a 5-foot sidewalk, and then it'll vary because it angles kind of funny right there, from 5 to 10 feet of additional landscaping along Ogden Avenue. So significantly more than was there before, a little bit more than we presented before. In addition, some comments from the board members, especially Chairman. We thank you for your input. We've added in the corners, and if you can see by this, where the red circles are, we've cut out a couple parking spaces. We were slightly over what we think we needed. So we've cut out a couple parking spaces and put more landscaping on the site, which we think was a great idea, and it improves it. We will continue to have on our south border along our residential neighbor, we're going to have about a 2-foot retaining wall and then a 6-foot fence set in. So there'll be a retaining wall, plants on my neighbor's side, even though it'll be on our property, a fence, and then landscaping on our side. So we're trying to give our neighbors a little bit, even though, and we'll talk about photometrics, no light's going to spill over, but car lights, anything like that will be totally blocked, so they will not have any, because the cars will be along that south property line. The building itself is a 50,000 square foot, 3-story precast and steel structure. And with your permission, I'd like to show you some of the materials that we'll be using.
Please.
If that's okay. You think of precast sometimes as just a warehouse. But what we'll actually be doing is on the face of the precast, these will be, these are thin brick, but these will be impregnated into the precast.
I'm gonna have to have you talk from there and,
You guys
okay.
can see it a little closer.
Why don't you hand it to me? We'll just pass it right around.
So that'll be stuck in, onto the face of the precast. They want to handle that, but you can maybe just even walk it around. And then what we're showing now is this will actually be the precast, and as you can see on the rendering, that will be exposed precast in that color, kind of along the bottom and along the very top of the building. And then in between these precast columns will be both glass. We have two different types, and these are all low E, fully insulated top-of-the-line glass. I'll leave these here, I don't know if you can actually see them. But on the rendering, or on the elevation here, it's maybe easier if I go over the rendering. So we have this precast here, which will have the brick on it. The exposed precast along the top, so that there's a little differentiation between there. Visual glass, as you can see, and then spandrel glass, and we've kind of made it darker just so you can see the difference. That's the spandrel glass. Spandrel glass is basically glass you can't see through.
Okay.
We do this in medical buildings a lot because people don't really want you to see them, or people. It's not like an office building where you want a lot of glass. So, but we thought that adding more brick or more precast would make the building too heavy. So we wanted to add more glass. So we did it with the spandrel panel, and then we have the visual glass that's shown there. There's also
Those
some
panes are split then, sort of, right?
Right,
They're both,
it's
okay.
split with this.
Those two, gotcha.
This would be in between it. And then we actually, as you can see on here, we have another, this here is
that, okay.
aluminum metal panel.
Got it.
So those are the main components of the building itself. On the roof, we will have two HVAC units, which will be sheltered, covered in an acoustical panels that are required by code. But it'll be in that same color of aluminum. We also have a canopy that comes out for the front so that people will be able to drive up and drop people off. It will not extend beyond that, though, because what we have found is that to do that, it has to be for a fire truck, so it has to be 14 feet high. That doesn't really shelter anybody. So we lower it, but don't let, so your car would not actually be underneath it. And that's about as short as I can make my presentation. Yeah, and we do have a rendering here to show you a little bit more how the corners are glass that comes together, so it makes it a lighter feeling building, even though it's a precast building. One other thing that currently in the building, there are tenants in the building, and the current owner, unfortunately, is still out of town and was not able to be here. We have been working with all the tenants. Most of them do not have leases or are month-to-month leases, but we have met with them, and we are financially going to help them out. We haven't finalized any deals yet. We're really waiting kind of to see where we go here. But we've offered a financial incentive package to the tenants, and we're working with the Las Palmas, which he does have a long-term lease, but we've met with him multiple times. We're working with him, and we think we found another location in the village of Westmont that he may relocate to. He's actually here tonight if you have any specific questions for him. So, if there's
I would like you to have your stormwater engineer address the stormwater so that we have it for the record as opposed to just Q&A. Can you discuss a little bit about the stormwater plan for the property?
Yeah, I wasn't here
You weren't.
to be sworn in. I did sign it.
Raise your right hand, a simple I do. Do you swear that your testimony tonight will be truthful, so help your God?
I did.
And would you please sign in?
I did sign it.
Okay, great.
I did sign it.
We're good there. Oh, you got it, okay.
Okay, yes, my name is John Talbot. I'm the Director of Civil Engineering for Weaver Consultants Group. We're headquartered in Chicago. We're about 500-person firm with 17 offices through the Midwest. I've been practicing civil engineering in greater Chicagoland area for, I hate to say it, 40 years. So I look forward to discussing with this property, again, the site plan takes up the entire property, so we are going to have to utilize a underground stormwater retention system. The system will discharge into the 48-inch sewer that's in Park Avenue. That is a very deep sewer. It's, the invert is approximately 10 feet deep in the street next to us. We have a lot of elevation on our site, so we will be up relatively high in comparison to that sewer. So we have my point is, elevation is really what controls a lot of your stormwater. We have a lot of elevation to work with, so we have some latitude on exactly how we handle. I've had numerous conversations with the village engineer, Noriel, regarding our stormwater detention. We can absolutely meet all of the city codes, the DuPage County codes, et cetera. I'm very confident that we can, in final design, meet all elements of the
And
village
would you
code.
say that you will be capturing all the stormwater on the entire property?
Yes, other than maybe the 2-foot landscape area
On the other
outside
side
of our fence, but, on that lower portion. But beyond that, we have no problems capturing all the stormwater that falls on our parking lots and the other landscape areas.
Because there have been some flooding issues in that particular area.
I was just
And
gonna say-
while this may not solve those, it at least will not contribute, it will stop contributing to it.
Yes, exactly, what I was gonna say.
Because right now, there's no stormwater whatsoever, so all that water that's on the site sheets over with no landscaping and works its way south along my neighbors to the park that's to the south of there. As you said, Chairman, we're not gonna solve everyone's, but we will stop any of that from our property. So it's gonna help not only my neighbors, but it'll help the village's stormwater also. So I just want to remind you
Sure,
that
yes.
nothing's there right now.
Yes, it's a very good point. We're making a dramatic improvement.
Great, thank you very much. I will turn it over to staff now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out part of the reason this was continued until this month's meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission, is we discovered at the hearing last month that in addition to the 3 approvals that we knew from the beginning would be required for this project, that was a rezoning, a plat of consolidation, and a site and landscape plan, we realized that a 4th approval would also be needed. That would be for a variance that would allow them to park, or for this development to have parking in a required yard. So because we take notification very seriously, and the notices that had been sent out for the March meeting didn't specifically state that that was a required approval, we continued the discussion until tonight. Staff provided additional notice, making it clear to everyone that there are 4 approvals that are required, and those are the 4 items that are being considered tonight. So I just procedurally wanted to explain to people what had happened and what's under consideration tonight. Other than that, I think the developers hit most of the issues that have come up at the last meeting, stormwater and architecture being 2 of the primary issues.
Great. I did omit one thing, Larry, I'd like you to address. Since you are asking for a variance, could you speak on the subject of the variance and the hardships it would create without?
Well, the biggest hardship is really an economic hardship, that we can't improve that property with what's currently allowed. We would need more parking. The other variance is the parking spaces and whatnot. Those, I think, are relatively minor, so that shouldn't be a problem. And
I'm talking about the parking encroachment into the front yard.
Yeah, well, we have moved it back as far, a little bit more once this issue came up, which we were unaware of, as we said. But if you look at all my neighbors up and down Ogden Avenue, no one's, I think the requirement's 30 feet, so no one's even close to that. And we're actually going to be, on the average, we're going to be farther away from the curb line than most of the buildings, even some of the newer ones. So we feel that we're better than anyone else really in our landscape, and it'll be significantly better. And we're going to put a sidewalk there, which doesn't currently exist, as well as landscaping from the curb to the sidewalk, from the sidewalk to our parking curb. So it's going to be a significant improvement from what is there now.
Thank you.
And then just one other comment, which we talked about, which isn't really a zoning comment, but if we're talking other reasons that I mentioned, the economics, our tax right now, the taxes are about $30-some thousand a year. we'll be paying well over $200,000 a year, which will go, of course, to the village, to the schools. Of course, we're not creating any new children. It's not like an apartment building that, yeah, we're paying a lot more taxes, but there'll be no children. So it's a very big economic benefit to all the taxing bodies on this site. Thank you again.
John, any comments? Or?
No.
Because of the unusual, in this case, issue with having a fully occupied strip mall, I'm going to call back up our economic director, Larry Forsberg, and ask him just to give us a little bit of a recap. Most of this is an issue between property owner and tenants. It's somewhat outside the purview of planning and zoning. But we do have an active economic development department in the village of Westmont, and Larry heads that up, and I'd like him just to speak for a few moments.
Good evening, again, Larry Forsberg, Economic Development Director for the Westmont Economic Development Partnership. Since the last planning and zoning meeting, I've had the opportunity to meet with each one of the businesses at least 3 times. And the conversations have been focused on their plans as to whether they wish to stay in the community, relocate elsewhere, or possibly even close their business. There are some that are undecided what their future plans are still. They want to see how this progresses. There are some, as Mr. Dev mentioned, Las Palmas is already actively looking. We have another site already identified in the community that we're in active discussions to secure a lease there. And there are some others that we're working with to still identify some spaces. So active discussions going on with all 9 of the tenants over the last month. And again, as we go forward, we'll continue to do everything we possibly can for those who wish to stay in Westmont to relocate. So any particular questions I can answer for anybody?
No, just good to know you're out there. Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Larry, I have a question.
Mr. Carmichael.
It was discussed last month that the Economic Development Committee recommended against this project in their meeting. And because they were concerned about the fiscal impact. And then the Community Finance Director, Spencer Parker, came out later with more information indicating that this is going to have a positive fiscal impact. And
That's a fair assessment. There were a lot of questions about what the impact would be removing sales tax generating businesses from that corridor, because that is the primary tenants along the Ogden Avenue corridor. When there was an analysis done by our finance director, it looked like there was a slight benefit with this property because the increased amount of real estate taxes that would be paid on this upgraded building that would offset the lost sales tax. So yes, that was analysis was thoroughly done, and that was one of the major concerns. So,
all right, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
All righty, next I'm going to go to the public, and I'd just like to set up a couple of rules first. Let's make sure we're not repetitive, so if somebody brings something up, keep in mind that we've already had 2 hours of public hearing on this, so many of the items have been brought up already. I'll give a little leeway on repeating those because it is a month later. We have some new people here. We have some people who may not be here both ways, but let's not have 5 people in a row say the same thing. So let's just try to keep it straightforward. I won't have any time limits or anything on that. And same rules, please make sure that you have been sworn in and sign in. And I think we have a first candidate ready to go. Good evening.
Evening, folks. Sign in, if anyone hasn't signed in yet. Okay. Bear with me, folks. I'm speaking for 2 people, for
Okay.
2 of the tenants today. Dr. Rogan, who runs the auditory clinic on the far side, could not make it in for this evening. She is in a conference. And of course, I'm still speaking for the folks at Nails and Facial. Given what you just said a couple of minutes ago about repeated questions, I will keep some of the questions from Dr. Rogan a little bit briefer than
Okay.
the verbose questions she had, given what you just said. Basically, she had the questions about lead time for clients, which was pretty much something that was discussed last week with the rest of the clients. Healthcare professional. Now, this is the question that got interesting. Of course, she's a medical professional. She is interested in moving into how do you turn this thing back on to show the medical building that they propose?
There
Oh,
you go.
thank you.
Look at
Thank
that.
you very much.
Magic.
She was very interested in terms of, she has an elderly client base, they're used to going to the same location. So when she saw that being proposed, she's like, okay, this is interesting. I would like to move in as soon as it's ready. Now, mind you, the email correspondence I had with her has a bit of a continuance because Bill tried to get a hold, you, of course, you tried to get a hold of her. Larry, you tried to get a hold of her. However, in later correspondence with her, she felt that, A, it's kind of interesting that there, for the talk of putting a medical facility up, there still seems to be this question of clientele that's supposed to move in as soon as possible. No offense, Bill. No offense, Larry. Her attitude, her mindset on this is, when you initially talked to her, she was like, she had the attitude of, you're immediately rejecting me? I'm a medical professional, I'm willing to move in? Oh, I'm sorry about that, sorry about that.
And keep in mind, some of these things, this one may be outside of the planning and zoning's purview. This is more of a
Well,
landlord.
it kind of goes to a zoning question,
Okay.
because is my understanding that this is zoned for multiple tenants or single tenant?
Either.
Either.
It's more the underlying use, not the number of tenants. So there could be a single operator, there could be, 20 different medical providers in the space or more.
Okay, okay. That kind of leans back to what her questions were and kind of lent back to some of the questions that happened at the first meeting in terms of number of waste facilities, how the building was supposed to be done. But to her end, it was more or less, I want to move in, I want to still be stay and be a viable tax base, but again, this is her feelings. I have a larger question base. if
She
you
would
want to
have
look at
to
it.
spend time with the developer on that, yep.
And she's in the process of. Outside of that, going back towards, and mind you, this is a little bit more towards what was talked about at the last meeting. Basically, given what's talked about, Larry, in terms of providing support and the other issues that happened, the tenants pretty much all came together after the first meeting, had a couple of meetings, came up with a list of questions. Some of them were directly presented to Larry via email. Others may have been presented to you via, okay, so we were the only ones, but, okay, sorry about this. But basically, we went through what was going on with what sort of help could be viable for moving to a new location in Westmont. Suffice to say, while it's nice to know that there's an $8,000 incentive for signage removal, outside of that, it was kind of a issue with the Angela when she read through this. I'm sorry, am I kind of still
we
doing
need to
that?
stay this way.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
But basically, Angela felt, or Miss Lou felt, that what was going on here was a little bit of a kind of anticlimactic. A lot of buildup of, oh, there's going to be help, there's going to be help. And then when it finally showed up, it's not necessarily understandable. And I'm kind of curious about one thing, though. During last month's meeting, this month's meeting, we don't necessarily address the owner, the actual owner of the mall. I was kind of hoping to have at least someone represent the gentleman who, and mistake me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gregory Smolensky, former mayor of Westmont? That is the owner? Okay. Because, sorry, I come from different politics from different states. And usually when I start seeing names, former government employees and whatnot, in situations like this, you think, and I know this is the zoning board meeting, and I know the main meeting's next month, regardless of what happens here. It just gets a little curious in terms of him being the owner, him having representation still with family in the government currently, it just doesn't come off. It would have been preferable, I think it would have been preferable with a lot of the tenants here, if he actually showed up. Gentlemen, I do thank you for doing what you are doing today. It's very commendable that you did come out here. But honestly, he shouldn't have let you be the shield for him.
You need to,
I'm
they
sorry.
can hear you if you
Oh.
talk into it.
I'm sorry, it's just I like to directly talk.
I got
I'm
that.
sorry, I'm sorry.
I
It's just,
I don't have the 360 camera today.
sorry about that, sir. It would have been better, I think, in a lot of people's minds if he was actually here. I really do. I mean, you've seen the other owners came. They spoke their piece, they had their PowerPoint presentations, and that was the same thing last month. And I've been to zoning board meetings in other states. Usually the owner or usually the person that's involved would be here. And not him being here trying to kind of have
All I
air
can
to
say is
it.
the invitation has been extended on multiple times.
All right, sorry. It's, the only thing I'll say is this. Given the makeup of the tenants and their immigrant backgrounds from China, from Mexico, from Greece, and some of the old world politics that you'd see in places like that, basically people scratching each other's backs, a little bit of scratch to try to get things greased, to get things through. It kind of brings up an old moment, and I'm not saying that but the perception does exist. And it would have been nice if he showed up. It would have been nice if it was just disclosed. It really would have. Because honestly, look, I'll be blunt. Back in 2015, I'm sitting with the Chinese expat community over in Lisle. And we had the mayoral candidates for Naperville, along with the city council, and also College of DuPage, come out begging the immigrant communities to invest in their Ogden, they're part of Ogden, they're part of I-59. But yet, given what I've been seeing with Angela, given what I've been hearing with some of the groups here, I'm sorry, word does get around to these communities. And if they feel that it's just going to be politics as usual, moving here, why are they going to invest their money here, invest their time here, when they can move on somewhere else where they think they're going to have a better shake? Anyway, so thank you for your time. I know there's plenty of other folks here to talk. I'm just going to take all this stuff down.
Thank you. Next, please. Yes, come on up. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm okay. And since the last month, and the March 13, I know what happened.
Can you just state your name, please?
My name is Angela Liu.
And did you sign in already?
Yeah, I
Okay,
signed
great.
here already.
Thank you.
And I'm in the nails and the facial owner in the 307 West Ogden. And since last the Republic hearing in the March 13, and I know the will happened in my business, so I'm very sad, and I can't sleep, I can't eat. I'm sick 1 week, but you know everything and what happened in my family, and my husband passed away last year, so I'm not get the lease. I'm not get lease, it's not my problem. And I go to the landlord, but Greg Zemsky, and he not signed to me. I have a 3 offer. And I opened my business in 2015, and I have offer need he signed in the 18, 20, 21, and the 24. And on my lease, I go home and I check him, but he not signed to me last year, 2018, March 1st. And I call him, and he say no. in that time, and he not tell me what the reasons. And but in that time, my husband very sick, get the liver cancer. So after get the big surgery, I pay attention to take care of my husband. And now, and I lose my husband, and I will lose my business. It's all my property. And I have son go to school, and I have another information. When I opened my store, and I borrowed the money, it come from my husband's side, the cousin. And now I still not return the money to her. And but she know it will happen in my store, and she find me. She said, "You need to return my money." So I more get stretched. So I almost, how to say it? It's in English. It's desperate. You know, but so I feel so sad right now. I don't want to cry here. I just want to explain to clear how is my feeling. If I'm your wife, if I'm your sister, if I'm your mom, your daughter, what's your feeling? I just, sometimes I complain, why my life like this? I come to American immigrant here. I have American dream. I work hard, and my husband works too hard, so he died early. Then I saved the money. I opened my store, and I borrowed the money. I want to earn the money and have a good life. I work hard, but I don't know this is happen. So why I stand here to talk, because I support it, make a Westmont pretty. I support them. I immigrate to American, the first place of Westmont. Until now, my house is here and my business here. I love Westmont. But I want give me, let me a satisfaction, the result. I can move, but give me, I cannot like this kick me out and nothing give solution, right? Because I don't have this, so you like treat me? I think that's not fair to me. We just, pledge allegiance to the one nation and God. You see, a liberty and justice for all. I'm an American citizen too. So, okay, I just talk like this because the other person is, so I'm so sad. I want, give me a good result.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and hopefully our developer and our property owner are listening to this, and we'll maybe be able to reach out and help. Thank you both.
And Mr. Chairman, just as a reminder, all the tenants are free to come up and speak their mind, whether it's about their lease situation or about the proposed use. But again, just a reminder, the purview of this commission is really to consider what's on the agenda, which is the zoning, the site plan, the variance that's in front of you, and the subdivision. This commission can't help you with your lease issues. That's something between you and if you have legal representation and the owner and the proposed developer. But you're welcome to come up and speak to that issue if you want.
Hello.
Hello. Me again. I'm Juanita Ray Dorn. I live at the house just south of this proposed plan. I bought my house 29 years ago next month, so I picked the location for its diversity and character of the village, and I feel that diversity and character is being pushed out, and the character of the owner of the property has been known to me for quite a while, with the using the parking lot, somehow being able to use the residential property for parking lot, being able to use the residential property to dump snow on that would drain into our property from the other side of the building, and do it under the cover of darkness in the middle of the night even, and still allowed to do it even after I called the police. They were also contacted to do just a little simple thing as putting a no trespassing sign on, so when the individual that likes to go over there and sell stuff to people on that property or behind the property, and they didn't do it. It's just neighborly stuff like that. But get back to the zoning stuff, I do have some questions. It's just an icky feeling all around. I'm sure you all feel the same way. I have a question about the actual, because I'm a visual person. Can we have somebody who knows, draw the tank in, the underground tank? Where's that? I can't see it on there.
I'm sorry, to draw what?
The outline of where the tank is underneath the property?
Detention.
Detention
Detention,
area?
okay. And just come on up, and you could just use a pen on that overhead
Right on there.
and point to it. You may have, you probably have the drawing, you could just put it over it.
We do. We are proposing a 60-foot stormwater detention easement that'd be 60 feet from the south property line to the north. The proposed underground detention system would be within that 60-foot easement and basically underneath the parking lot in nearly this full area.
That's it?
That's it.
Because I've actually had the opportunity to see an underground detention area being done at the VA hospital and on Roosevelt Road out there, and it covered the whole, it was in the whole
Well,
area.
keep in mind, it's done as a mathematical equation based on the zone, but based on how much property there is. So, I mean, this is governed by DuPage Stormwater, so they have to operate, they have to engineer this to meet county as well as village standards. So, I mean, he's talked about the size, then there's also a depth to it, which is going to create volume, which is then going to in turn be what captures the water on the whole property. But every sewer on that, every manhole cover in the parking lot is all going to aim towards that. And then that's going to have a slow release into the system.
And they also talked about a retention wall being like maybe 2 feet high, but if I stand on the low part and look over to the top where they're probably gonna, is there gonna be a slant, a slope of the property? Or, because it's not 2 feet, it's not only 2 feet high, it's like to the highest part of the property.
I will have to let,
I don't see how it could be a 2 feet retention wall only. I'm confused.
No, we are sloping down from the sidewalk adjacent to the building to the south. All that stormwater will be caught by the curb right there, but it's, I think we have a 3 or 4% slope coming down. So again, in 100 feet, if it was 4%, that'd be 4 feet lower at the curb. So we're within, very, very reasonable guidelines on our slopes.
I think you were
For flood
talking about
areas?
on your side of the fence, the 2 feet that the developer was speaking about. Am I correct, or?
To build up that, because it's real low, that's the lowest point, is right there by my house.
By your driveway?
No, my driveway's on the other side. My
On the
house
other-
is right there.
Okay.
That's my house.
I agree.
I mean,
We come down and we do need a little bit of, verticalness, because I agree, that's the lowest part of the site at the southeast corner. So we need to raise that up a little bit in order so that we can catch all the water, get it into our system. What we propose to do.
there was talk last meeting about the kind of release of the water into the storm system. I was wondering if you got any information on that, because I didn't see it anywhere in the,
You can ask away. There's the gentleman who's in
because
charge.
you had mentioned there was one that it could fill up if it had a certain kind of one, and everybody else had, all the other water had priority.
Well,
There's
I
two
mean,
kind of release, right?
Yeah, when it's our
Okay, sorry.
turn to
Okay, well,
talk,
that
we'll
needs,
get into
because
that in
I'm really
detail.
concerned that it's only that big, and they're sloping the thing to my lot, and we already flood worse than we ever have, even without rain. Like the property back here, the property over here, that's supposed to be a retention area, It was full of water on Saturday and it hadn't even been raining.
Well, that may not be being maintained. I don't have any idea about that. All I can tell you is that this, under current ordinance, will need to capture everything that's on that property, everything.
Okay,
None of it can go to you.
okay.
And they can't get approved by the county or the village until they satisfy both of those requirements. I'm not sure that I am smart enough to explain the math to you on how the
That's
whole
why
volume
I
of the
wanted to
thing.
see the picture, because I
But
couldn't see
that's
it on
still a
there.
substantial amount of volume that that's going to hold. That's 8/10 of an acre, I believe, on that particular lot, and so that's probably going to be over a half-acre vault.
Mr. Chairman, ask him how many gallons for the public, how many gallons can it
Yeah,
hold?
do you have a rough idea of how many?
It's 1.2 acre feet of water. An acre foot is 1,600 cubic feet, 7.8 times that. I haven't done the math, but I mean, it's very substantial to meet the county and the village code.
Okay, my other question is, I see the driveway is really close to my house, and there's a curve which was discussed of having them only go left. I don't see that change on the plans. Because of safety issues with the park down the street. I personally have a 1.5-year-old, and, you know, that's gonna be an incredible amount of traffic that's not being directed left.
I know
like
that
it
was discussed. I don't remember that being agreed to, though, at the time. I don't know if anyone else has better memory on that.
And also, the curb and gutter, they're saying they're putting a curb and gutter, and where this driveway is, it floods right there, even during like just a normal heavy rain, not a incident rain. And all that water with the curb stopping where it is gonna be directed right into my front yard instead of where it would be dissipated, you know, the whole way down. And the driveway appears to be over the sewer, the drain, the rainwater drain, the big, huge drain where they directed from my driveway, they directed all the water to go down there. It appears to be over that. And I don't know.
Well, they can't do that, so the drawing may not be perfect on that, but I don't see that on there myself. Well, it sort of got moved out.
We are fully improving the street, so we are widening the street per the village code, the entire street. So yes, existing stormwater structures that are at the current edge of pavement will then be relocated to the new curb and gutter of the widened street. So we will be adjusting the drainage to accommodate the street, and I believe that will pick up, you know, a lot of that water. We're going to be catching, there is no, as was said earlier, there is no detention now. We're vastly improving the situation by catching all this stormwater now and detaining it. And where there is no blockage between the current lot and her property, now our curb and gutter will prevent water from moving to the south onto her land. It'll all be caught by the curb and gutter and go into our system. If that wasn't enough, it will drain it down and out to the street rather than onto our property.
So you're gonna have a drain right there to go into the thing, right? At
Yes.
the end of down the hill to the street?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just getting questions answered. Also, I might suggest also using, I said also a lot, sorry, putting some kind of security system just for your information, because there is drug dealing going on in the area at the park, in that lot, behind the lot, just so you know. And it's gonna be more secluded over there?
Yeah, you need to talk
Oh,
this way.
It's gonna be more
can't-
secluded over there with the fence and the greenery and stuff, and it is a concern. I've been fighting it for about 5 years now.
Well, that is actually something that didn't get discussed last month, so thank you for bringing up a new subject. We do see a lot of new developments having a security camera system, and I will ask the applicant if that's in the plans.
We
Good to hear that.
And of course, it'll be lit too.
Oh.
I didn't mean to respond to.
No,
but-
you're fine.
But it will be, of course, lit, though, our whole parking lot. We did talk about, though, is reducing the lighting later in the evening, which
Yes.
will work with staff and with you, you know. But we kind of like light and cameras 24 hours a day so that we make sure that none of that's happening there now would continue.
Okay.
I think that's it. I just had questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I like the new one too. Thanks. Who else would like to speak tonight? Anyone?
What?
Okay. Come on up, though.
It's actually a request. I know the fence will probably help, but, this trash, where they have their trash, can it be put somewhere else, not by my house? 'Cause you're more than halving the distance towards my property here, the garbage man at 5 AM.
We'd be happy to work with staff to find a different location. Again, this isn't like restaurant trash. I mean, it's not going to smell or anything
I'm
like
worried
that.
about the noise, 'cause
Yeah.
they come really early, and
They,
especially in the
they
summer.
usually do, so we can work with staff in
Well, I think
finding
the
a better
problem also that
location.
you're gonna have is that they're all, no matter where it goes, I think you're gonna hear it on the property, probably, because I hear them a
We
block
can move
away
it to the
from my
west, side. We
house.
can move it maybe like to over here or
Well, and
something.
you're, because there's a, a whole row of them now, so
Yeah,
it's
so
like
you,
one
it'll
over
be,
there.
it'll
Well,
be a
this
lot
is
less
gonna be
than there's
just
now.
one now.
Yeah,
Yeah, there'll be a lot.
So it's gonna be a lot quicker deal, but
Yeah.
I agree.
But maybe farther away.
Okay. All right, last call here. Anybody else? All right, I am going to move on to commissioners, and I'm going to begin with Commissioner Bartel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question I had is, emergency vehicles, are they able to access easily with the
Yeah,
curb
we had a
cut
traffic
going-
study done where we laid out for the village code that fire trucks can get all around the building.
So the fact you're going from 5 cuts to 1 on the top and then 1 at the side, those are sufficient?
Yeah, fire trucks will still be able to get all around the building.
Okay.
Yeah, we meet all your codes regarding radiuses of the turns.
Thank you. And also, the pork chop, does that entrance, is that across from Williams? We talked about that last month.
It's a little bit offset from that, but what we've agreed to do is we will not allow a left-hand, let me think.
Oh, you're right, a
go-
left hand
if
onto I.
Going out and going left to the west. So that's why we added the pork chop per our traffic engineer and your traffic engineer's comments.
Okay. And this lady talked about going out on a left-hand turn from the back entrance as a one-way towards Ogden. Is that something that was discussed?
It was discussed, and we said we'd agree to anything that the village would, if they'd like a left-hand turn only, we'd be happy to do that. That has not been requested of the village, but
Something to talk
we'll
about.
be happy to work with the village on anything like
And the
that.
other questions I had were answered, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Lavoy.
Yes, I have another number of follow-up questions. And since we're on stormwater, we can talk about that, because I don't know if anybody at the last hearing really understood the question, but I'm glad you're here, John, so if you could, please. The question that I had was related to the calculation of the stormwater as it relates to the volume of the chamber, and with the close proximity of the flooding area directly to the south. My question was related to the tailwater effect on the release. And effectively, what happens is that if you're releasing to a pipe that's full of water, your allowable release isn't correct. So it's something that I was looking for an answer as far as the volume of the chamber. Was it done with a zero release, or could it be done with a zero release to address the tailwater and the flooding downstream?
Well, as I was talking earlier, that sewer is very low in comparison to even where our stormwater system is going to be. So we're always going to be, again, I have not done a full off-site drainage study, but even if that was full, we're going to be higher than that. So we will always have some release, since we're at a higher elevation, into that pipe.
If the pipe is full?
Yes, because it'd be pressure flow from us being higher down in. I believe we would always be above the hydraulic grade line of that sewer.
Could you just submit to the village the HGL calculations, if you don't mind? Just want to make
Well,
sure that we're good, because the flooding downstream is pretty severe, and it's on the surface, and that means the pipe is full of water, and your calculations assume that there's going to be a release when there's no release.
I have discussed this issue with Noriel, and we will continue to look at that very specific problem. No, I have not done an off-site drainage study. I believe, it all comes to the hydrograph of that sewer too.
Right.
I don't know at what point in time,
Yeah, I understand that.
its hydrograph is longer out than what ours would be for an individual site. So I think that when it starts raining, we will always have some release to that sewer at the initial point of a storm. So unless there were some sort of antecedent conditions, there's always going to be release from our site. So I don't think we'd ever have a situation where there would be zero release.
Well, I beg to differ, but anyway.
Okay, but Noriel and I will work through that very closely
I just
together.
don't see how you could, yes, initially you're going to release to the pipe because the overall drainage area that creates all the flooding conditions around the neighborhood, the time of concentration is a little different than what
Right.
yours is going to be, and you're going to be quicker, and I understand that, but as you move through a pretty severe event, the surface water is ponding and that pipe is full and you don't have a release.
Well, but by then, I believe we'll compare hydrographs, but we'll already be full of water. We will have already provided the full volume of stormwater detention that's required of our site.
But if you haven't done the calculation yet on hydraulic grade line, you can't prove that. So I'm just asking you to do that.
We will absolutely commit to working with Noriel on that topic.
Okay, are you here to speak about traffic?
Can
Can you answer a traffic question?
No, that is.
I had a question at the last hearing about the alignment of our entrance related to the north access and the conflict that it creates with a southbound Williams left turn and a westbound to southbound into your site conflict because there is not enough room to stack cars in the middle lane.
Your traffic consultant, the village and ours both agreed that that was not going to be an issue. But we did agree to make the left turn out, which would be a conflict. We would not allow that type of turning. So I think that the premise of the question is probably incorrect by the experts, and that's why we did what we did. We tried to slide it over and to line them up, but we lost virtually a whole row of parking, which got us underneath your code and was not available to, the market is requiring more parking than that.
So shifting it doesn't, adding parking where you're shifting it from and.
No, I mean,
it doesn't work?
I'll show you.
Because if you shift it to the west, you would avoid that conflict entirely.
Let me show you what I'm. If we take this here and shift it over to here, it's not like we can just take this parking and move it, because now you don't have a nice straight row coming down. So you have to come, you have to turn it around. So we lost about 20-some spaces when we tried.
I know, but if you moved it all the way over to the next drive aisle, there would not be any conflicts.
All the
Right
way
where your
over here.
finger is, yes.
Now we're on the other side of the street. You know what I mean? So we never can line up with the one to our north. And so we offset it and then we put the right turnout only, so we don't have this someone turning left when someone else is trying to turn left on Ogden Avenue from across the street from us. So because right now, it comes out right about here, just to give you an idea. So if a car's coming this way, out of this street and turning left, you will not have another car coming this way, turning left into our parking space.
Could you bring that document over, and I will draw the motion that I'm speaking of, because I don't think you understand my question. It's okay, and that's what we're here for. My concern is,
And I'll put it then on the screen.
yeah, I'll get you back to the podium in a second. that, you'll understand what I'm saying.
So if we have someone going west on Ogden Avenue,
Turning into your site,
turn left into our site,
yes, and coming southbound from Williams going east,
and then someone coming out of
there
there
isn't
going
enough room
left,
for those two cars to stack.
which is kind of what you've got now, times 5 entrances. So
Yeah, but all you had to do was shift it a little to the west, and you wouldn't have that. It would avoid that.
yeah, unfortunately, that wouldn't work for us. That layout just won't work. We lose too many parking spaces.
Commissioner Lavoy, I don't understand how you shift it and it eliminates it, because
It does.
as soon as you have 2 or 3 cars lined up, you'd have to move it all the way down. I mean, you have that along, I'm up and down Ogden all day long. You have that along the whole way. That's why there's a turn lane. So cars navigate around each other.
They turn right into each other in this condition.
I think if you got a guy sitting there waiting to make a left turn, the other guy goes around behind him. You see it coming out of every auto dealer and every other one. That's what I see. And I use several of the services in that particular strip mall.
So I understand, Commissioner, what you're saying. It's not a perfect solution, but we do have a turn lane there to the left.
We're here to, look at these things. And
Yeah, no,
to
I
get
understand what you're
A
saying.
great solution out of maybe a good solution to get a great solution. I see a better solution just shifting it without losing parking.
If
And
you
I'm
could
trying to
design
avoid an accident
something,
there,
if you
so-
could figure that out, I mean, we've had our experts lay it out, and we lost parking.
Okay.
But I would agree that if we can relocate it and not lose any parking, we'd be happy to do it, absolutely happy to do it.
I'll
We've
move
tried
on.
it, and our experts aren't good enough to do it, to make it work. But if you come up with it, I would agree to make that change to the plan.
Yeah, I'll make one final comment. If you did that and moved that entrance to the right on the screen, to the other driveway, I know it's moving it away from the entrance of the building, but all the radiuses work. And externally, you wouldn't have a conflict at all because there's no entrance across the street.
I think what you're saying is just take this and slide it over.
Yeah.
Your driveway, your drive out would be right here.
No, it slide it all the way over to the next driveway. There. Yeah.
Well, now you're on the other side of this street, though, so you.
But that motion is eliminated.
We lose a lot. I mean, I'm not opposed to that if that's a requirement of the village. I think that we lose
I
landscape.
just see that as something that you avoid, that turn-in conflict. During a rush hour, people rushing across the street and trying to get out into the dead man's lane, and somebody turning in could be coming at the same time, and it creates a conflict. It happens all the way up and down Ogden Avenue, and I just happen to see that you could make it better.
Right. I appreciate your comment. I'm opposed to it, but if that's what the board's recommendation will be to get approval, I would happily do it.
Okay. It looks like there's some conflicts between the landscaping and the detention system. Some of the trees that are specified are deeply rooted and may conflict with the underground system.
John's looked at that, so that we won't have big, heavy trees sitting on top of it. So we've looked into that. We don't have final engineering yet, so those are the ones we.
I'm just looking at what I've been given.
Yeah,
and
no. I'm just saying, the
appears to
landscaping's
be-
a set. We're not gonna change that. But if we have to relocate our detention a little bit one way or the other so that we don't have heavy trees, well, yes, that's a good point, but we've thought of that already.
Okay, and what specifically have you changed on the building? Can we just go to the building?
Absolutely.
I know you brought in materials, they all look great. We were looking at the roof line the last time, and we were looking at maybe breaking it up a little bit, and I can tell by that drawing, there's a little shadow on the corners.
Yeah, what we've done is we've actually inset, our architect answer any questions, we have made some changes so that we do have shadow lines, which I think were brought up. So we brought this in, we've thickened these columns a little bit, so we do have some plate, so it's not just a flat. We looked at altering some of the roof. It's not long enough. It looked really kind of funny in our opinion when you start having roofs going up and down. Plus, right now, we're at the code limit, and so we didn't want to ask for a variance to start raising and lowering on a relatively short building. We see that on much longer buildings.
Okay.
But the materials, I hope you see that, these are all absolutely top of the line expensive materials. This is-
Yeah, very nice. Then I have a question about it shows up on the, I think the preliminary engineering drawing. There's a line of existing utilities that run right through the building, and pretty high number of transformers that are on that. That's all gonna be vacated.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
all coming out.
That's what I say, that's all dedicated just to the existing building.
Are you gonna put
Doesn't
them
keep
all
going.
underground or not?
I'm sorry?
Are you gonna put that utility?
Everything's underground.
It's gonna go underground, but would it become underground down to the property line?
Yeah, there'd be a drop right at the pole that's in park.
And are you gonna go around on the Ogden Avenue side or on the residential side?
I'm not sure where we're going to pull our power, to be honest with you, so I don't want to say yes or no. All of the utilities on our site, though, will be underground. And wherever ComEd says they want us to pull it from, I don't think there's any poles on Ogden Avenue. I can't. So it'll come from the east side of our property. You know, and it, just as a comment, is we're redoing that whole street. We're actually adding curbs and gutters to the east side, which is not our property at all.
I was just thinking
I'm
that
just kind of throwing that out.
utility out, that, I can tell it's gonna get relocated, but where and how much of an impact to the neighborhood is that gonna be? And because you got that drop on the south line in grade, is that gonna be, is there enough room in there for you to get that utility, or whatever utilities are on the poles underground?
Yeah, I can't answer that. We'll work with ComEd, and they'll tell, you know, you don't really negotiate with ComEd. They say, here's what you're gonna do, and we will do it. But once we're on our property, we won't have power lines going from, you know, over our property.
Okay, and my last thing is that if we could restrict that right out motion on Park, that would be beneficial, because it's something, once you're at peak hour, there's gonna be an increased traffic to the neighborhood.
We have no problem doing that, sir.
Perfect. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good, Chris? Commissioner Carmichael.
My turn. Yeah, my first question had to do with that left-right turnout of the southeast corner of the property. Now, how would that be handled? I mean, you say, well, if somebody wants it, we'll do it, or
No,
what's the
if you,
process?
I would say put it in, I mean, you tell me how you want to do it. Put it in there that a no right turn sign would be placed at that exit.
Would that be all the time, or during certain hours, or what would be the
I kind of like it all the time, to be honest with you. I mean,
staff?
A suggestion, and maybe Village Attorney Zemanek can weigh in on this, but you could add a condition of approval or a condition to your recommendation that a pork chop be added onto the Park Avenue entrance. Or do we do conditions of approval?
So the pork chop would allow a right turnout. I don't think a pork chop is the solution. I think if anything, you have a curved curb that
You're right.
would encourage a left turn, plus signage that says
Yeah, you're
no
right.
right
It's not a
turn
pork chop.
allowed.
Yeah.
And we can put that as a condition in the ordinance, along with the condition that was discussed at the last meeting, which had to do with a cutoff of the parking lot lighting.
which
except
we've
for-
accomplished.
Yeah, except for minimal security lighting.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of one of our, when we heard a grandmother come up and say that we were going to run over her grandchildren, our first response was, no, because everyone's going to go left, and now we can legally require them to go left.
I live one lot away from a medical office building like that, and there's a cutoff of, I think it's 11 o'clock for the parking lot lights, and it's nice to have that darkness at that.
Yeah, honestly, I'd like to leave some light up, though. So when we say turn them off, we'll turn the, but we do need some light
You
back
have
there.
to leave security, yes.
Yeah, just for security reasons and with our
Usually
cameras.
building lights, there's enough from, if you have sconces on the building or something like that, that provides enough light, or if you have some low
I think
lights.
we'll have to work with our security company and staff to show them, you know, what's the minimum foot candles that we need. But none of ours spills over. Plus, don't forget, we have a 6-foot fence, so that's going to even block it more. And it's all dark, nothing's going up, it's all going down. I just hate to agree that we're going to turn them all off. 'cause
Yeah,
that
no,
would-
we can work on how that's
Good,
gonna work.
thank you. I think we got carried
Okay,
away.
and before, I have one more question for you, but I'll start with, I wanted to add my voice to some of the opinions I heard that, again, I think it would have been very helpful if the owner could have had a designated representative at this meeting. On the site and landscaping plan, I asked you last time about if the landscaping on both the north side and south side of the fence that runs along the south side of the property, if it's going to be drip irrigated, and I think you said
On our
yes,
side, it would be, not on their side, we would have bushes on my neighbors, although that would still be on my property, because that retaining wall would be on my property.
The site plan I'm looking at shows sod both on the inside and outside of the sidewalks on the east side and, well, all along the south side of the property, plus east and north sides. Will that sod be watered?
Oh, if it's on
how-
our property, yes.
How will it be watered? I mean, with...
Sprinkler, we have a
Oh,
sprinkler.
okay,
yeah,
it will be sprinkled.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you meant on the south side of the fence. That
No,
way.
no,
Okay,
no.
but everything
On
else is fully irrigated,
property.
absolutely, fully
Okay.
irrigated. Yeah, my mistake, I'm sorry.
Gotcha. No further questions here. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Van Buren.
Well, it appears that you have responded to many of the questions that we've had last time, and it looks like you've attempted to adapt some of these to your plan. My concern is still with the ownership, where you were having to pick up where they've dropped the ball on the ownership and treating our other businesses that are valuable to us in Westmont. And I appreciate your doing that.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
hope
just,
you can-
you know, we have met with all of them, and we're in the process, even ones that have no leases, which unfortunately is the case, we're still going to help her financially, even though legally, we or the current owner has no responsibility at all. But we're willing, and we're sitting down and negotiating with all of them right now to help them in their relocation.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Thomas.
In regards to that, and the attempting to help the relocation of tenants and that, I'm very proud of Westmont taking the additional steps in the economic committee in that. And you yourself, I appreciate that very much. Also, with the retention engineer, if, when you go to the board, the next meeting, if you could run the numbers and come up with total gallons, like for the how much you can hold in the tank, quote unquote, whatever you call. No problem. It would help for laymen to understand how much water that you're
really
going to be
talking
able to
about?
hold that's not being held now and that is running.
Sure, we can absolutely have that for them.
It couldn't hurt your cause.
It's a good suggestion, thank you.
It's probably easy enough to do on a cell phone.
No.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, what was the number?
Yeah, I knew that.
I just did it, 391,000 gallons.
391,000 gallons.
Yes.
That can't hurt.
Could fill Village Hall.
Yeah. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Sharp.
Hi, welcome back.
Thank you.
I want to touch base on the variance. I'm glad that we got that cleaned up from the last month. I agree with your sentiment about your neighbors along the corridor not necessarily having any kind of strong standard of that 30-foot setback. And this is the same, I feel like we have the same 30-foot setback and little footnote in our zoning code in other corridors. 63rd Street comes to mind. And in that corridor also, it seems like this commission has split preferences on how to handle that. There's a lot of new construction, new development that gets exceptions from that variance. Like, obviously, a lot of existing conditions don't meet that requirement. So I'm just, I guess a note to staff is I think that we need to look closer at where that requirement came from and what our intent is to uphold or not uphold that requirement, because it comes up so often on these corridors, and it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. When you look at, even outside of our village, Downers Grove, Clarendon Hills, as you go east and west on these corridors, it's not like it dramatically changes and that corridor is markedly improved. So just a note, I agree with the applicant that the street frontage is going to be remarkably improved over the current condition with the trees, with the buffer, even though it's not a 30-foot buffer, it's still a nice buffer and nice landscaping. So I think it's going to be dramatically improved, and so I'm in favor of that variance.
Thank you.
I do also appreciate you guys bringing the samples in. That was very helpful. I think I had forgotten that you guys are intending to put inlaid brick into the precast, which I think really helps, I guess, my comfort level with the facade. If it was just stamped, the rendering makes it kind of look like it's just stamped.
Yeah,
I
no,
would
this
not
is
be
real
in favor
brick.
of that. And I do see, you know, it does fall under the purview of this commission, so I do want us all to look at these elevations, understanding that this project is going to dramatically improve the site and the surrounding area, but we're also gonna be, I don't wanna say stuck because that's negative, but we're gonna live with this facade for several decades once it's built. And I guess I still feel that the comments that we had last month weren't taken to heart. I do see a little bit of improvement. I see a shadow line at the base. I see maybe an inch or two protrusion at the corners. But if you kind of just squint your eyes even just a little bit, it's the same building as it was before, in my opinion. I think that there are things that we can do. You had talked last month about how you wanted to keep the architecture simple for the tenants. You want to keep clean boxes on the inside to kind of maximize your lease economy, and that makes sense. But I do think that there are opportunities here to give real shadow line to the facade. I'm talking simple, like mullion caps, maybe some louvers along the windows, even just I understand the height, if you're at the max height, but maybe you actually make some kind of monumental parapet that has a real shadow line or real presence to it. So I think what the building is lacking right now is character. And I think character is important for a new development like this on Ogden Avenue. I wouldn't be concerned. I think that the proportions, the composition, I'm not intending to insult it. I think it would be appropriate in another setting. If it was fully enclosed, let's say in an office park, I think it would be fine. But if this is a big corridor, I think it needs to be dressed up a little bit more than it is. So I'm eager to hear the other commissioners' thoughts on it, but I do want to propose that maybe, and get your feedback. If you're willing to do something more, then I could support this. Otherwise, I don't think that I can.
Okay, thank you.
That's all my major comments. The last comment from the neighbor about the trash, I think is a great catch to have right now. It's easy to make that change right now, presumably, if you guys can just flip the parking with the trash and.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that,
Yeah,
as we said.
I think that's just a great catch. So, but that concludes my comments. I'm eager to hear what the other commissioners think.
Thank you. Most of my questions have gotten asked and answered already. I do have a couple. We had a discussion last month, and I believe Con weighed in on this, regarding the material for that rear fence, which is adjacent to the first homeowner. And I did not see, we talked about a synthetic type.
We'll do whatever, you know, we looked at different ones, the village, and we said, we'll do whatever. We haven't picked one yet, but we're willing to do it in a wood or we kind of like the PVC type of only, but we'd like it brown. I don't want to necessarily, it's a lot less maintenance for us, so we're definitely willing to do that.
Well, it's a lot less maintenance. I think it looks a lot better, and it's a lot stronger. And I would also encourage you to reach out, since she's going to look at it at half the time.
I mean, I would ask you to pick what
So it would be
the
good
design
to,
that she likes on
work
her-
together
yeah.
on something like that. I think that would be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Because I feel strongly about that. Every time we see wood fences, they're usually either coming or going as far as their lifespan is concerned. And I think these last a lot longer, and there's some beautiful coloring out there that you can get, as opposed to just the stark white, which came out early. But now there's several shaded options and things.
Be happy to work with our neighbor and staff. fix something.
One thing that's not been discussed, because there have been so many questions, but if this were to be approved and if this moves on to the village board and were approved, what is a general timeline? I think that with some of the tenants that I've talked to, they're curious about if there is any type of a timeline to this.
We were talking approximately 4 months between the time we notice them that we'd like them to terminate and when we'd ask them to go. If someone says, look, I need a few more, if I build it in 4 months or 6 months or 8 months from now, I'd prefer not waiting more than 6-8 months. But we'll work with the tenants to find, for instance, with Las Palmas, there's a restaurant that's available now, so that's something that would probably happen sooner. These other tenants are relatively typical, retail tenants. There's space on Ogden Avenue available today. And as I said, we will help compensate them for the cost of their move, even though many don't have leases now. And that's coming from us, not from the current owner, although, unfortunately, he's out of town. But he's been helpful in working with us also, and he's pushing us to help his tenants too.
Okay. And the right turn on Park. Okay. Those are the end of my questions. Thank you. Commissioners. Commissioner Sharp brought up an interesting point. Commissioner Lavoy brought up an interesting point. We have any discussion on these two or any others? Yes, Bruce.
The petitioner's architect is here. Maybe he could come and have a discussion with Commissioner Sharp about some of the aesthetic issues you raised.
That's more than welcome. I'm just not sure as to the procedure or what we need to accomplish in our vote, so.
Well, are you open to suggestions, or is this design that you have?
I'd say I'm open absolutely to improve it. Sometimes someone likes pink and someone likes, you know what I mean?
Beauty can be in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly. So I'm absolutely willing to have my architect and you sit down after the meeting, come up with some ideas. If you want to thicken the mullion, stick it out a little bit more to get even more. Those things definitely we can work with. But if we get carried away, you end up with a zebra, and I really don't want to do that. But yes, we'd be willing to sit down on the issues you mentioned. I think I think we can come to a middle ground that you're happy with and that will work for us. So I'd be happy to do that.
And how do we leave off with Commissioner Lavoy's comments about lining up or moving down? That's going to be just looked at?
I don't know if we gave the staff where we laid it out and we showed how many parking. We'd be happy to resubmit that if we haven't gotten it to you, so that the Commissioner can take a look at it. And if he has, again, we're willing to do, but we kind of need the parking. We really can't lose parking spaces.
That,
so,
yeah.
I can show you by moving it over and aligning them what it does to our parking count. And I know that the Commissioner doesn't agree with me, but I feel that we're trying to solve a problem that really doesn't exist. It's not a heavily traveled road coming into Ogden Avenue, so you don't have a lot of people coming and making that left-hand turn at the same time we're making a left-hand turn into ours. And I think many people would be coming down Ogden Avenue and might turn down, Park to get into the building too, make that left-hand turn at Park before they go up to the entrance. But
I'm sure you can get a little of everything, yeah?
Right. But it'll be a lot better than what's there now, that's for sure.
Okay. Any other comments by commissioners?
Yeah, I'll go, Mr. Chair. I think I'm pretty strong about it. I agree with Commissioner Sharp. We didn't see a whole lot of change in the building at all. And I just don't think we got the solution that is right. That's just from my own experience. Williams is not a lightly traveled road. It's right next to Aldi and a shopping center. It's the main egress to the shopping center. And if somebody comes out of that shopping center and wants to turn eastbound, it's going to be a conflict with somebody trying to turn into this development.
The good news for them, they do have the option of using the light. I shop there, and I always go for the light. I don't mess around with it.
You could, but it's also pretty long residential street that come out to Ogden Avenue, too. They're not gonna cut through to go to a
All the
light.
way in, absolutely.
So, and if they did address it, they did look at it carefully based on our last month's comments. They could see if you shifted it to the west, it would avoid that conflict entirely because you're into the turn lane for the commercial developments. You no longer have that particular conflict and I'm thinking of people that are gonna access that. You know, and I look at it differently, you know, just because of my experience, and I understand it, but, you know, if I have something that I look at on this commission, and I know that it could potentially cause an accident, and I know that I can see something better, I feel pretty strong about it. I also do not agree at all, if that pipe is underground, and we flood on the surface, the pipe is full of water. And the difference there is when you calculate the detention, when you don't release the water, if you calculate it with no release, the volume goes up because the water doesn't leave the system. So it fills up faster than the 100-year event because the water that you calculated to allow to be released doesn't happen. So I don't want to argue the point anymore with the developer, but I'm telling you that's what happens. So I'm pretty strong about it, and you know, what they could do is design it for the zero release, increase the volume, so you're designing it so we already know that it doesn't have a release. The volume goes up, they provide the additional storage, and they're done. But that's not what I heard. So I don't want to contribute or have this project. I understand that the volume of the chamber meets the code requirements, it meets the detention volume, but the volume is based on an allowable release that doesn't happen. So I know that when you calculate it, it does get adjusted with a zero release. So that water just doesn't leave the system and fills up earlier than the 100-year event. And then what happens is at the 80-year event or whatever event it is, it spills over their overflow. And that's when you get the impact to the neighborhood. So if you have no release, this fills up quicker, and then it spills over sooner than it should. And that's what happens. So it's Noriel can handle it, but I'm just saying that I'm not convinced, okay, from what I've heard in testimony tonight. And I'm not convinced about, you know, some of the other things related to the landscaping and the building in particular. You know, I didn't mention in my questions, but yes, Commissioner Sharp is right. And I just, you know, that's really sad because we're here to make a good solution, a great solution. And I didn't see it. We spent 30 days coming back with the same thing practically. And then the other thing I didn't mention in my comments because it's not our purview is that the owner of the property hasn't shown up. By the way, I'll just go on the record with our commission saying that whoever the owner is, if that's related to the village in any way, has no bearing on not only me, but any one of you's decision on this project. That has never come into play, never been discussed. And you know what, I respect and honor all of the commissioners here and our village attorney and you yourself, that would not come into play in any kind of decision, and it certainly didn't in mine.
Certainly agree with that. Well said.
If I can make a procedural comment?
Yes.
I guess first about the owner. Since the owner signed the application and gave permission for the developer to come make the presentation, there's not a legal requirement that he or she or it appear, but I understand the concerns from the various people who said it would be nice to have the owner here, but not legally required. As far as a vote goes, you have a couple options. One, if you think that they should go back and look at the access point onto Ogden further and architecture further, you do have the right to postpone this or continue it for another month. You also have the option of voting on this as written, plus you can vote on conditions such as consider additional architectural features as suggested by Commissioner Sharp, and consider relocating the access point and presenting that to the village board. The village board would always have the option, if they're not satisfied, of sending this back for continued public hearings.
And then on the water issue,
Well, the water issue usually is not solved at this level.
it shouldn't be.
And you guys have dealt with this long enough to know that you know, one, they have to comply with codes. If there are special or unique concerns, those can be addressed, but eventually this has to go through final engineering, which is going to take some time. The concerns of, you know, the commission can be relayed to Noriel, and it will have to be addressed. And Commissioner, you're certainly free to, you know, communicate your specific concerns to Noriel, because he may not be watching this tape. And Bruce, maybe you can also inform Noriel about that as something to look at.
I think on the two major ones I hear is architectural. I mean, I like the building. I'd hate to change it, to be honest with you, but if it's important
For
to
the
you.
better, for the better.
Yeah, you know, we'll sit down after the meeting or in the next couple days, whatever is convenient for you. Regarding the entrance, we can slide it over, but we'd lose a little bit of landscaping. So if that's, I think it'll work for us. I was just talking with the architect. We'll probably lose 4 spaces though, but I think 4 is not going to be that detrimental. So if it's that important to the commission, we will relocate it if that's the decision of the board.
And that includes the spaces that would go where the current.
Well, we're going to gain
egress
spaces back
is.
there, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we were just talking about. We're going to have to slide these over a little bit to get the proper turn. So we lose these spaces and these spaces. We'll lose these spaces, but those will be replaced pretty much by here. So it's not I think we'll still meet code. I think we were over on code. We from a medical building, more is better than, so I think we'll still be okay on the code. But if that's a requirement of this, we'd be happy to do that.
Bruce?
I think you just answered my question. I wanted to make sure that you weren't moving the entrance over to the west, the equivalent of a couple of parking stalls, and then having traffic entering your site.
No, that's what I was concerned about.
Tee into parking stalls, and then they'll back up into the street. But I think what you just said is there'd be a drive aisle.
Right, it would look, and then, boy, I might have a great architect, as you can, it would be like, basically somewhere like right here.
Okay.
These would have to move over, I think, 1 stall, because you've got a lot of traffic. Yeah, to make all the turning radiuses work.
The issue is, and the challenge when we design on the fly is, you might be solving a problem that's being brought up here, but creating a problem that none of us are thinking about in terms of traffic backing up onto Ogden or conflicts with cars backing out of stalls, and
That's why I put this one, I don't know how we turn this one on, to show that our neighbor to our west, it doesn't have an exit right there, which was concerning of me, but it's not, so it would allow a little bit better. So I would commit to that we will relocate it if it's the desire of the board, unless there's some major things that staff or their traffic consultant comes up with.
I agree with Bruce's comment that we can't solve it here. That's what we have a professional staff for, that's what we rely on.
Yeah,
They need to look at it.
We'll make it as a motion for you to take a look at, and that's how I would favor it, and then the commissioners can choose to vote which way they want on that. All right, any other comments? Yes, Commissioner Sharp.
Does it make sense to change the wording of the, I'm concerned about the architecture, as you know. Instead of say consider elements or
I'll let you make the
conversation, does it make sense to say add additional elements? Is that legitimate phrasing?
You can be more, yes, absolutely. You
Be
can be
more
more
assertive.
assertive in your motion.
It's not because I don't trust you guys, it's because there have been other projects come through here that have promised things that have not happened. And I drive past those projects every day, so I just wanted to be more assertive. That's all.
Yes.
And maybe in your motion, you can reiterate some of the architectural features that you mentioned earlier that they should incorporate or consider incorporating.
Okay.
All right, any other commissioner comments? Staff? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing. And I am going to go ahead and begin. I will entertain a motion for planning and zoning, item 19005, a request from Bill Debs of GSP Development regarding the properties at 301 to 315 West Ogden and 530 North Park in Westmont for the following: A zoning map amendment to rezone the property at 530 North Park Avenue from the current R3 zoning to the proposed B2 zoning.
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Bartel, second by Commissioner Thomas. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner LaVoy,
No.
Commissioner Carmichael,
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. I will entertain a motion for item B, a plan of consolidation to combine the properties at 301 to 315 West Ogden Avenue and 530 North Park Street into one lot.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Carmichael, second by Commissioner Van Buren. Comments or questions on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Carmichael,
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
And Commissioner LaVoy.
No.
And me.
Oh, Chairman Pill.
Yes. I will entertain a motion for item C, site and landscape plan for proposed new medical office building.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Van Buren, second by Commissioner Sharp. Comments or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Sharp,
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner LaVoy?
No.
Commissioner Carmichael?
Yes.
And did I tell you twice, Chairman Pill?
Yes. I will entertain a motion for item D, a variance from the zoning ordinance section 4.05E to allow parking to encroach in a required yard.
So moved?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Bartel, second by Commissioner Carmichael. I remind everyone that this motion will include the findings of fact as they were presented to everyone. Any comments or discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner LaVoy?
No.
Commissioner Mark Carmichael?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
I will entertain a motion to have the applicant work with staff in looking at a potential relocation of the entrance on Ogden Avenue to align more safely with the cross-traffic.
So moved.
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Thomas, second by Commissioner Bartel. Comment or discussion on the motion? Worded good enough, Chris? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner LaVoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes, and Chairman Pill.
Yes. Commissioner Sharp, would you like to make this motion?
Yeah, I would like to add a motion to require the applicant to add some features similar to Brizolet system, window shade, louvers, awnings, a monumental parapet, or similar elements, not all of those elements. Similar horizontal, decorative, or performative projections, and to work with the village staff to
If I may
revise
ask,
the
could you take
plans.
out canopies? We don't really want to have canopies over the
Sure.
windows, but
No
okay, thank you.
canopies. I don't
Anything
mean
else?
those fabric storefront canopies.
We have a motion. Have a second?
Second?
Motion by Commissioner Sharp, second by Commissioner Bartel. Comments or discussion on the motion?
I have a comment. If we vote no on this, and it goes to the trustees, and they feel the same way as Commissioner Sharp, they can also send it back
Yes,
to us.
yes.
Or they may feel that some of the architectural changes are minor enough in nature. Not that they're not important, but they're just not significant enough to send back for a brand-new hearing, and they have the ability to approve such minor changes because the footprint, uses, et cetera, parking are not changing. But they do have the right to send it back.
They can send it back no matter which way we vote on it.
Yes.
If they feel that they need changes, if we would say no, and they would support your view, they could still send it back to us for further consideration.
If they proposed ornate Greek columns that didn't fit the architecture, they may want to send it back for you guys to consider.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bartel?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavoy?
Yes.
Commissioner Carmichael?
Yes.
Commissioner Sharp?
Yes.
Commissioner Van Buren votes yes. Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
And Chairman Pill.
Yes. Anything else, gang?
Just a comment, once again, to reiterate to any of the tenants or tenant representatives that might be here. The recommendation by this commission and any vote by the village board is not in any way related to your leases. The village has no idea what the lease situation is for this property. Is having Larry Forsberg try and work with the tenants to work something out, but in no means would a vote of approval by the village board on this project in any way impair your lease rights. That's for you guys to figure out what your lease rights are and negotiate that with the owner, and if you feel necessary, retain your own legal counsel.
Just a couple of cleanup items.
I want to just finish. Is it about this? We haven't finished this one yet.
It's not about this.
Okay, yep. So you have our recommendation, which will move on to the village board. There were two new motions, you heard both of them, one about the street, one about the architectural detail. So I ask you to take those into consideration and work with staff. Staff will also work with you and notify you as to when you'll appear before the village board. To the public that's sitting out here now, that will be posted on the village website under the agenda section for the village board. When you click on agendas, they're always first. Everybody else is alphabetical, but they get top billing. Yes?
Wait, can I actually have one more comment?
Sure.
With the two conditions, one was a reasonable cutoff for the park, the lights in the parking lot. If you could propose a time and what types of lights would remain on for security purposes, we need to incorporate that condition into the ordinance, and I'd like your input, and then I'll review that with staff as to whether that's appropriate. And the other thing that was discussed is the encouragement of a left-hand turn only out of the site onto Park Street. And we talked about maybe adjusting the curb line there, plus signage. So that may be a slight tweak to your site plan, if you could incorporate that.
Yes.
And then I would piggyback on that, two other ideas that just are loose ends that we don't lose sight of. I don't know if they require motions or not, but the resident to the south had suggested that the site plan be revised to show the dumpster being relocated. So we need to make sure that that change is reflected. And then there was the suggestion that the developer work with the property owner on the south on choosing a fence material and possibly a color that may or may not need to be formalized.
Okay.
If I could add one comment to that?
Sure.
There is a product out there that staff might want to consider, which offers a sound component of the fence. It's called SimTech, which can be filled with rubber material to take care of the sound coming from the commercial properties to the residential. It's probably an ideal situation for that type of product.
Thanks.
All right, that concludes that item. Staff, any other comments, or?
Are we done with that?
We are done with that item, yes.
And the applicants know that this moves on to the village board now?
Yes, they do, and they know that you'll be in touch with them as to when that schedule will occur, and I've already announced to everyone who's seated here that it will be up on the village website.
Great, okay.
We have a few more little things we're gonna catch up with. You're welcome to stay. We love to have the company. You're also welcome to go. if you do go, I just ask if maybe you guys could just shut the doors in case you want to have discussions out in the hall.
Can I give you his card?
So, moving on to the next item on the agenda, after some talks with Chairman Pill, we came up with two discussion items that we thought we'd present to you. One is about a process change, and this would basically be mimicking a procedure I used at a previous job, and we would call it initial review. And John, I'll be particularly curious if this would or would not require any type of ordinance change. It might require an ordinance change, it might not. But I worked in a place where if staff determined, or if the chairperson determined that a particular project, for whatever reason, might be controversial or might be particularly complex, staff would be directed to put it, or staff would decide to put it on the agenda, not for a vote, but just for a heads-up, first look by you guys. The applicant would be invited to come, explain it, give you an opportunity to provide some feedback very early in the design process. There would not be notice. I mean, the agenda would be public, but if the proposal required a public hearing, the public hearing would be later, and notices would be provided for that public notice, typically at the second meeting. So we didn't do it for everything. We didn't do it for fence variations or garage variances or minor special use permits for a business moving into a retail space or a commercial space. But for a project like this probably would have been something that staff or the chairperson would have said, let's do initial review. Let's just have that discussion, meet the developer, learn what they're doing, get our concerns on their radar, and then we'll schedule it for the public hearing. One of the reasons people liked that, plant commissioners in particular, is often I was told that they felt like the first time they saw something, there was a public hearing scheduled, and they felt that there was some pressure, whether it was perceived or real, that they needed to vote that first meeting, and that tabling it or postponing it somehow felt like bad. I'm not being very articulate. So they appreciated the opportunity to see something before there was this sense that you have to vote on this particular item tonight.
Basically, that's happening with our Economic Development Committee, but it's not enlightening us as commissioners. Right?
Yes.
One last thought. The downside is, I've worked in communities that prided themselves on being very development friendly, and were very reluctant to add anything to the review process that would draw it out or lengthen it. And I've suggested this at one community, and they were like, no, that's just going to make it longer for the developer, and we want to be development friendly and get things reviewed and decided upon quickly. So there's the downside to adding another step in the process. And then, as was just stated, there's this other issue of the Economic Development Committee and its role that I'm still learning, and what its purpose is and how it interacts with this group. So
I feel it's been doing for us, it's been doing pretty much what you said. It gives them an opportunity to look at it from their perspective, but also gives us a report. And I think if we added this layer without eliminating that one, it would be pretty cumbersome.
I've seen it, towns that have a concept plan review initially, typically only for PUDs or planned developments where you have really large-scale, complicated developments. Take the 63rd and Cass development that you processed, or what we went through with the Hilton Hotel Natatorium project. Those are really larger in scope. A single site, single building, medical office building may have the perception of slowing down the process because you have two full months. There's also a potential negative perception of the public that because you kind of closed them off during a first meeting and you guys talked about this, not privately, but not receiving public input, that by the time it comes around to publishing this and getting the public input, that you may have prejudged this and already say, yep, we worked out some of the kinks, we're ready to approve this, irregardless of what the public says. And while the public can have great comments, whether you'd be willing to change it at that point is unclear. So I think certainly for the larger projects, it makes sense. For something like this, this commission has had multiple public hearings for projects in the past when you're not comfortable as to all aspects of it. Even if we did not have to publish for a zoning variance here, this may have been the perfect project to continue for another meeting to work out some of the details. So I think it's a good suggestion, but there's pros and cons.
But would that require an ordinance change?
Yes.
The economic development, oh, sorry, go ahead. You had your hand up first.
I agree, Wally, saying economic committee, development committee is in place now and does kind of raise the flag and let us know what's coming and it gives us an opportunity to look at it.
Well, some things will never get to us because when they go there, they get negative
Right.
feedback.
And it's fixed or dropped,
Which may be
whatever
or
way,
may not be
whatever is
fair.
called for.
May or may not be fair, but I think from developer standpoint, to go 2 steps before the public hearing might not be the efficient way of doing things.
And there has been sensitivity to some efficiency, to your point, where the other community pushed back. You know, the village does, from what I've heard in the past at least, I think wants to be as developer-friendly and move things along, because sometimes, you know, engineering can take forever
Right.
as it is. So
If I could do a follow-up question, or I can wait until after Commissioner Sharp?
Commissioner Sharp.
I just had since I am also not very familiar with the scope of the Economic Development Committee, but I don't have, my impression is that they are not covering the same interests and angles of
No, they
perspective
have
that
their
we are.
perspective, the business perspective.
So there isn't necessarily, I don't think there's a duplication. I haven't found them to be very helpful for my review because they don't pertain to my review, and nor do I sit in on those meetings or get meeting minutes from them. So I understand that they're in place. On this particular project, they actually recommended against. We didn't spend hardly any time talking about their recommendations or.
they recommended against primarily, as I understand it, because they thought there, with this being a non-retail use, that there would be a
Right.
financial disadvantage to the village. That turned out ultimately not to be the case. But to your point, maybe there's a way to beef up a little bit what the criteria is that the Economic Development Committee looks at, and then a report back to you guys as to each point. Part of that might be a business aspect of it that's not germane to this commission, but other parts of it may be.
And I appreciate this discussion because Nalini and I obviously are both new. We're unclear, I'm unclear, I'll just speak for myself, on the role of the Economic Development Committee and its relationship with your body. I'm tempted to just make it black and white and say they look at fiscal impacts, you know, sales tax revenues and, you know, that kind of stuff. And they don't look at traffic and stormwater and design and aesthetics and zoning and uses and comp plan stuff, but I don't know.
Well, they also look at just whether an idea is viable. I mean, that's, I think, where it starts. You know, so if somebody says that they're gonna go ahead and put a Portillo's in a half-acre lot, you know, somebody's gonna say, that's never gonna work. It's, no, they're not gonna get into architecture, they're not gonna get into traffic studies, but they are gonna look at the overall, that's the first thing. So before somebody invests in the money that it takes to come before us, which is substantial depending on the size of the project, they have a chance to go ahead and vet an idea out there. That's probably its number one. Economic coming second, and there is very little architectural review. You are correct.
But I would assume that the Community Development Office would play to some extent that role before they gets to this level. I mean, you guys would be able to say, Portillo's, you're not gonna fit in the half-acre lot, or.
Yeah, like, don't even go to EDC because this is not viable, you'll never meet the parking counts. Likewise, architecturally, I know in the past we've had staff do kind of a pre-review and say, you know, this is a blank wall, there's, you're gonna have a hard time based on historical comments you guys have provided, and some of that burden can fall on staff to try and address some concerns preemptively.
But this proposal that we just discussed tonight and last month is I think, a very good test case or a good example. My view of it and review of it was much more in keeping with the discussion we had here tonight. I'm less familiar and less comfortable with the discussion that was had at the Economic Development Committee, where it was a lot about revenues and economic impacts and fiscal impacts, and I'm knowledgeable about that, but I don't bring that.
Are you a member of the Economic Development
I
Committee?
attend the meetings.
You attend the meeting.
I've only been to one. It's unclear to me if I'm a member. I think I don't vote, I think. Do I vote?
Do you have a badge?
I'm not that familiar. I've never attended a meeting, so maybe that's something we can
I think I'm not a voting member.
discuss.
One thing I would like to see is, when we have projects that we discuss here, that we have the minutes from the economic meeting that suggested this or that, because we really don't have the background.
And there are minutes.
And there are minutes, and if we are not able to watch the meetings, they're not televised, are they?
No.
So we just have the
They're
minutes.
public, but not televised.
But not televised, so we wouldn't have an opportunity to see them unless you're there, which we
And
can't
that's
always
if the
get to.
minutes are prepared in time,
Well,
depending on how close the meetings fall on staff.
there'd be a better alignment.
It's only
I
one
think.
week. I attend the meetings whenever I can. It's
Oh, do
very,
you?
very helpful for me to listen to the presentation. of the-
anybody's allowed to
Of the
attend.
developer. Here's their proposal. And then there are
just
some
having the
excellent
minutes
questions that
would
come from the
help
table
us
that
with
may,
our review.
may not all be, from our perspective, but it's sure
And if the
helpful
minutes
for me.
aren't able
If they're
to be
not ready.
prepared quick enough, then staff
Yeah.
in the report that comes to you can maybe hit the highlights.
Yeah, just some history of that would be helpful.
And we as staff would be happy to do that. It raises a small concern for me because, again, I think my limited understanding of that committee is that their focus is on non-zoning, non-planning issues.
Yes.
And so, again, we'll provide those minutes, but I'm concerned that if and when we do, it may cause you to take into consideration or factor into your thinking things that are debatable if they're appropriate for a zoning review, like what is the fiscal impact on village revenues?
Maybe we need to revisit the objective of that committee. Just basically, what is it that they're responsible for, and who's on it, and, how is it represented?
Right.
Just a little bit of background would be helpful. We don't have to agree with what they say. We
Right.
obviously can
I mean, they're,
make our own conclusion.
they're just like a courtesy committee on behalf, working for the
Non-binding.
applicant, right? They're
Non-binding, as you saw this
not
one.
enforcing code or some kind of.
But to Bruce's initial point, which is for those complex projects, what do you feel about, irregardless of whether EDC is there, about having a concept meeting first? Do you think that's a viable concept that would have merit?
I do, but then again, I recognize that lengthens the schedule, and I know that land contracts, there's a lot of influencing factors that, talk about schedule. And I wouldn't want to see it schedule delayed because of it. But I know that I'd be willing to help staff at any time in advance of something coming, of actually reviewing it ahead of time, so you get comments from us in advance of the primary first meeting. And that this is, something that, I've taken the time, within that 30 days, maybe we get our packages a little early, and, as early as you get them. And, during my leisure, I would give you give me a bullet list of things that you like to see, or, that you see in the plan so far. And that might, take away the need for a separate meeting, but give you the input that you might need, to get things through quicker.
I'm going to provide a personal perspective here in that I talked to a lot of people about these meetings. Since last month's meeting, I probably had 20 or more conversations with various people who were in the room. They approach me, they see me, they're cutting my hair, I'm picking up guacamole, whatever. And I think one of the most important things that we provide is the ability for the people who feel detached from government with an opportunity to voice their opinions. And I think anytime we have a meeting where they can't do that, when we're the body that's supposed to do that. So I would say that if there was a unique situation, and I think probably the only 2 or 3 I could think of would have been the Natatorium, 63rd Street, maybe the old Standard Market back when it happened. I guess I could see that, but I would certainly not want to extend this down. And I'm not even talking about to the fence concept, but even to something like this. I think we're wise enough to go ahead and look for a continuance if we need it. Whether the variance was going to be required by John, which came at the end of the meeting, I felt most of us were thinking that a continuation was sort of imminent last month, only because there were so many things that were left open, in addition to questions about the tenants and things like that.
And their experts weren't here.
Right, and the experts weren't here. And we've talked a little bit about making sure on the checklist with applicants that there weren't, and so we've gone into that in the last 30 days and we've discussed that. Making sure that the experts are told to be here, that final landscape plans are here. We went through a whole list of things. And so that will tighten things up a little bit as we move forward also. So I just want to say that I think that's one of our single most important jobs, is to allow the public to speak. And I don't want to cut that short too often.
Well, this would just add another step to it, but I agree with John that there could be it perceived as we're a body who is supposed to be dealing under oath, under a testimony situation, and any information or anything that's discussed during that time is not being done under testimony and not being done public. And you might be violating the Open Meetings Act.
Yeah, it's almost Open Meetings Act is.
Well, no, the Open Meetings Act just says you have to publish an agenda and, give notice. But you raise a point about the testimony under oath part, but nothing prohibits you from having a conceptual meeting legally, as long as you have the required public hearing and get the necessary testimony under oath that's needed. But there still is that perception of public coming because it's an open meeting and saying, well, I want to chime in on that, and you guys saying no. And it doesn't look good.
Sure. Okay, no, that helps. If we're ready, then I just wanted a quick hit on a final discussion item. This regards the meeting schedule for the summer. Full disclosure, part of this idea of combining the June and July meetings is because I will not be here for the July meeting. I will be out of town on July 10th, which is our regularly scheduled meeting. I don't know what other, no, already taken off. I don't know what other people's summer schedules are like. This could be very complicated and a bad idea, but I thought I'd throw it out there. And it also depends on caseloads and timelines for applicants that we need to be respectful of. But if it works for you, and if it works for the applicants and the cases that are starting to come in, because they usually come in a good 2 months before a meeting, would there be any support here for having one meeting at the end of June instead of 2 meetings, the regular June meeting and the regular July 10th meeting? I'm just throwing it out there for discussion.
How is the schedule,
You don't
heavy
know at
is
this
it
point what comes in.
about items, potential items?
I know the May agenda is filling up. I think we have 4 or 5 items. And so if that's any indication, it's going to be a busy season, and we may have a lot of cases, and this idea I'm throwing out there may not work for that reason alone.
Right. Any indication on?
If it works, it's fine with me. If
Yeah.
it works with that the agenda items aren't that heavy.
Fine with me
we
too.
can
You know,
do
if we
it.
can help you shift dates around and not jam a agenda so we're here till, wee hours of the late night, yeah, we'll help.
June 26th, a problem for anyone? That's just the Wednesday between those regularly scheduled.
Make sure this room's available, because there are a few other governmental entities that occasionally use this room for meetings, because they can take advantage of the recording system.
Sure.
But we would take priority, of course.
I'll see if the room's available. It sounds like if it works for the caseload,
I'd be fine with that.
and the room, we could do that. If we're heading in that direction, if the room is available and the caseload looks reasonably light, I'll let people know as soon as possible. If you don't hear from us, then just assume we're staying on the 2-month schedule.
Any predictions on One North Cass?
Not in the next few months.
Is that, what about the 400 block of North, 300 to 400 block where they took down all the trees and everything? What's going on there?
Yes, can I give an update on that?
Yes, please.
So, and John may be able to fill in some of the gaps based on what I've learned since I've been here. That was a planned unit development for a townhome project.
I remember.
That was developed, that was approved, I want to say about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they never built it. They got some extensions that kept their approval alive. They just recently came in for a building permit for the first of 4 buildings. So it's 4 townhome buildings. I think each building has about 8 units in it, 6 or 8 units, I don't remember. So they pulled a permit to build the first townhome unit, and that will be the one closest to Cass Avenue on the east side of the project.
Does that require a street, a curb cut from Cass?
There will be what I believe is a private street coming from Cass and heading west on the southern edge of that development. Whether that needs a curb cut or an intersection, I don't know that.
Okay, it can't be accessed from Lincoln.
Okay, so Lincoln is the north-south street on the
Yes,
west.
yes.
It gets a little complicated, and you may remember this from when it was under review. The developer was required to dedicate right-of-way on the west portion of his land
Because
in anticipation of eventually when enough little pieces get cobbled together, Lincoln can go through.
Yes. The fencing went up today. The construction fencing
So,
and the silt fencing.
Apparently that by getting extensions, because normally if you don't do something within a given period of time and it dies, you have to come back with it. Is it identical to what the original approval is?
Or mostly identical. There may have been some tweaks that were deemed insubstantial enough not to warrant new public hearings, but they've come back on either a yearly basis or at times maybe they got like a 2-year extension, because I think they were dealing with some finance issues and apparently going through some complex engineering that took a long time. I don't know how much of that was related to finance, but they got their final engineering approval, they posted their required letter of credit, and they're ready to go.
Good.
This is Naperville, Cass.
So from that, I can deduce that Lincoln is gonna go north of Naperville Road?
Someday.
Well, it's a long, it's, yeah, it's in the future.
There's a lot of problems on there.
I wouldn't deduce too much yet. I wouldn't bet the ranch yet. All right.
Wait, Bruce, is there still a project or a potential project coming at the Westmont-owned parking lot on Cass in Burlington?
One North Cass, that was.
Oh, that was the one North Cass. I was thinking that project was in reference to the south.
Still in negotiations as far as, because it's in a TIF district and there's some economic incentives being discussed. That's kind of the root of what's holding up that project, whether we can come to terms. It's a lot of moving parts.
Has title been taken on it already?
One West Quincy is moving along.
That's the one I thought, yeah.
But they have not closed on any of the properties either.
No.
And I would just add a quick addition to that update for One West Quincy, which is on the south side of the tracks. The village manager and village engineer convened a meeting with ComEd about 2 weeks ago that I was invited to, and there's still some utility relocation issues that are being resolved in terms of the power lines that run down the existing alley needing to be moved. So I was unaware of that, still needing to be addressed, so that's now being looked at.
I think that was actually brought up in our commission about the turning radiuses in the back, and it just didn't work.
Well,
And
that's a different issue. He's talking about
poles were in the way.
ComEd.
Yeah, there's a pole right in the corner that has to get
There is.
That
I
relocated.
remember you here
Relocate,
talking about that.
And then we talked also, you guys are putting together the new 2019 zoning maps. And we'll see
Yes.
those in one of our packets upcoming.
We will try to get them in the May
May
packet.
packet.
So.
Great. Sounds good. Anything else? Our next meeting is May 9th.
8th.
8th? Oh,
Let me look here.
I wrote it down wrong. How about that? Mistake.
Wednesday, May 8th.
Wednesday, May 8th. Sorry about that. Anything else to come before the commission? Hearing nothing, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Thomas, second by Commissioner Sharp. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.